Chapter 365. Inescapable Net 3. Jianchen sat on the cavern ground with a calm posture. Although it wasn't suitable to stay here for long, it wasn't time to leave just yet. He would have to wait until nightfall before he could leave, so that the chance of being detected would be extremely low. Nightfall was already fast approaching on the outside, and cast a dark light over the grounds. On the highest peak of the mountain, 8 elders stood in a circle as the violent wind blew their hair into a messy state, and forced their clothes to look as if they were ready to tear apart. Third Elder Kai, do you really think Jianchen is hiding within this mountain range? A red-robed elder looked at one of the 4 brothers and asked. The man nodded his head. Although he is fast enough to leave me behind, I was able to see that he left no marks traveling away from this mountain range. Then would you be able to ascertain his position within this mountain range? Another person besides the 3rd brother asked. It was the 3rd elder of the Jetta clan. The 3rd brother shook his head. I couldn't. The area here is too complex, and is also made of pure rock. Even if he were to leave a trace here, it would be hard to find. The other elders went quiet, as they all thought about the 3rd brother's words. They had already searched the entire mountain range for half the day, but there had been no traces at all. At that moment, the eldest brother of the Kai family spoke. 3rd brother, I've heard that Jianchen's speed was far faster than yours was when you flew through the air. Is that true? When the 3rd brother thought back to when he was chasing Jianchen, he couldn't help but let out a sigh as he spoke. Correct. Jianchen's speed later on was extremely fast. He was somehow able to outpace me. With that speed, I would say even the 3rd elder wouldn't be able to catch up. The 3rd brother spoke. You speak words of crap. The 3rd elder is a wind-attributed 4th cycle Heaven Saint Master. Aside from another wind-attributed Heaven Saint Master, there is no one alive that could outrace the 3rd elder in speed. The 4th elder exploded with rage. The words that the 3rd brother had said infuriated him. 4th elder. The 3rd elder waved his hand, as if to abate the 4th elder's anger. The 4 Kai brothers, and the Shi family, were on special relationships with each other. All 4 of them were Heaven Saint Masters with high rankings. If the 4th elder were to give them no face by swearing, then a potential problem may occur. Hearing this insult from the 4th elder, the other 3 brothers grew dark in the face. The 4 brothers were friends against the same enemy, so when the 4th elder insulted one of them, he had insulted all 4 of them. Fellow brothers, 4th elder has always had a nasty temper, please forgive us for that. Please put the blame on me instead. I hope that fellow brothers will not hold this against us. The 3rd elder spoke with a kind expression on his face, as he cupped his hands together in a sign of apology. The 4 brothers' faces improved a little after this. They weren't aware of the explosive temper of the 4th elder, and so they didn't care for it. With this apology from the 3rd elder, they all immediately gave the matter no more attention. Let us discuss our next plan then to find Jianchen within the shortest amount of time possible. He has the family heirlooms of our 2 families, we cannot afford to lose them. The elder of the Jetta clan spoke. But the area around this place is vast. Jianchen could be anywhere within this mountain range. With just us looking for him, I feel that we should ask for more help. Let us hire some people to help us, and have some other mercenary groups join in as well. The 4th brother spoke with a vexed face. The time they had spent chasing Jianchen had been unbearable. This plan has merit to me. The other Jetta clan elders spoke in agreement. The 3rd brother of the Shi family spoke. Jianchen is an extremely smart person. Whatever we can think of he will be able to as well. Furthermore, we've already administered such a method once in the 1000 Poison Valley, so he will definitely be prepared for such an event. I say that he will try to take advantage of the night tonight to escape. Thus, this night is the most important night. We should split into 8 directions, and watch over the area, so that he won't be able to escape. After the next morning, we should send one person to go hire several mercenaries to comb the mountains and search for him. This method is decent, let's do it. With the proposal planned by the 3rd brother, the rest of the 8 made preparations on which area to guard before splitting up. Within the dark cave, Jianchen continued to sit with a calm expression. Although it was extremely early in the morning, he still made no move to leave the cave. 2 hours quickly went by, making it almost 4 in the morning. By this time, the tiger cub had already woken up and was crawling around the dark cave while mewling with a joyful expression. Slowly opening his eyes, Jianchen stood up and listened for movements around the cave. Then, returning the night pearl, he scooped up the playful tiger and headed out of the cave. Walking to the cave, Jianchen slowly moved away the stone covering the cave, afraid that he would make a loud sound and alert any of the hidden Heaven Saint Masters. It seemed as if even the white tiger had sensed that there were dangers hidden in the night and remained quiet. Poking its head out of Jianchen's clothes, the tiger cub stared all around the area with its bright and curious eyes. Stealthily walking away from the cave without a sound, Jianchen began to travel, as if he was a specter in the night. With his presence concealed as he crossed the mountain range, not a single sound could be heard. At the same time, 10 kilometers away from Jianchen, an elderly man was sitting on top of a mountain peak, as if harmonizing with the world itself. After cultivating so hard and becoming a Heaven Saint Master, not only was he able to control the world energy to fly, he could also detect any changes that happened within it. At this moment, the sitting elder immediately opened his eyes as 2 mysterious glows began to shine within them. There's a disturbance in the energy, something's making a move. The elder's eyes grew fierce as he instantly flew into the sky like a specter in the night. Within a few breaths, the elder had landed upon another mountain range where the night had completely overtaken it. Even without much visibility, the elder's eyes could still stare down and see something of interest to him. "I finally found you." The elder let out a smile in surprise. Then, without hesitation, he flew toward the dark figure. At the same time, the dark figure that the elder saw seemed to have spotted the elder and immediately sped up in speed. "Jianchen, where do you think you're going?" The flying elder roared before increasing his own speed to try and overtake the escaping figure. Within the peaceful night, the elder's explosive words had rang throughout the area, so that the other 7 Heaven Saint Masters would be able to hear him loud and clear. Immediately, several sharp sounds could be heard as the other 7 Heaven Saint Masters came flying into the area. Like a pigeon startled by the twang of a bow, Jianchen immediately gave up all pretense of stealth and flew faster toward the mountain exit. The darkness of the night was nothing too major for any of the Heaven Saint Masters to be affected by, so all of the elders increased their speeds once more. In this chase, Jianchen was able to escape the area quickly, with the usage of the illusionary flash and the Heaven's stolen fortune to increase his speed. He was like an arrow in the night. In an instant, he had been able to traverse a long area of ground, with a large dust cloud trailing behind. With the combined usage of both the illusionary flash and the Heaven's stolen fortune, the flying Heaven Saint Master that were chasing after him quickly disappeared in his wake. Afterward, Jianchen began to slow down a bit and stopped the Heaven's stolen fortune. He knew that if he were to go too quickly, then the dust trail would give his position away and allow for the group of Heaven Saint Masters to quickly discover where he was. But not too long after Jianchen had let up his speed, a dazzling cyan light could be seen flying through the dark night with a terrifying amount of speed. "Blast it all, it's a wind-attributed Heaven Saint Master." Jianchen cursed before reactivating the Heaven's stolen fortune. His speed instantly skyrocketed so as to escape the Heaven Saint Master behind him. The wind-attributed Heaven Saint Master chasing behind him was the 3rd elder of the Shi family, and was also the very same person who had initially used the poison to threaten Jianchen. Seeing Jianchen's figure grow farther and farther away, the 3rd elder gasped in shock. It seems the 3rd brother's words were not false. This Jianchen's speed exceeds the realm of possibility if it is able to beat mine. This is truly hard to believe that an Earth Saint Master could achieve such a speed. Jianchen's new speed would only be enough for him to travel for 2 hours. After those 2 hours, he would be utterly exhausted. He wouldn't even have enough strength to fight, let alone escape. Chapter 366. Inescapable Net 4. As he ran, Jianchen continued to think about his options. Changing directions every so often, he made a dash for the nearest city. Jianchen had already memorized the surrounding environment, So he knew that 1,000 kilometers away was a single first-class city, with a wind-attributed heaven saint master chasing after him. He would only be able to throw him off temporarily. If he were to stop, then the heaven saint master would quickly catch up. So running without a purpose or direction was out of the question. Once his saint force were to become empty, then he would be at a point of no return. He had to enter a city, with many different types of people around. He could hide himself without being caught. Quickly, Jianchun made the journey to the first-class city, and when he arrived he leaped over the wall to hide among the buildings sheltered behind it. Not too long after Jianchun's disappearance, an azure streak of light could be seen as the third elder flew through the air. Floating in the air during the middle of the night, he stared down toward the city. What a crafty youngster! Seeing how you stopped within a city, that means you cannot keep that speed up for an extended period of time. Afterward, the elder remained motionless as he studied the city with his eyes, as if trying to find a trace of Jianchun that could be followed. Some time later, the sounds of 7 heaven saint masters flying through the air could be heard before finally stopping right next to the third elder of the Shi family. Third elder, could Jianchun have hidden himself within the city? The fourth elder asked. The third elder let out a sigh. This Jianchun's speed is truly too fast. Even with my entire strength, I was unable to keep up with him. He managed to disappear in the city, and I've yet to figure out where he is located. How is that possible? Third elder, is Jianchun's speed so truly fast that even you cannot keep up? The fourth elder's eyes grew extremely wide in disbelief at the words coming out from the third elder's mouth. But he wasn't the only one. The 2 brothers from the Jetta clan could only stare in disbelief as well. An Earth Saint Master being able to outpace a wind-attributed Heaven Saint Master was an impossible feat until now. Hearing this, the third brother of the Kai family hid a small smile. If even a wind-attributed Heaven Saint Master wasn't able to catch Jianchun, then Jianchun escaping from his hands was not too much of an embarrassing thing. This Jianchun is far too crafty. To hide in a city where there are thousands of people and buildings, finding him will become an extremely arduous task. If we are not careful, he'll take advantage of our carelessness and slip out among the others. One of the elders from the Jetta clan spoke. Fellow comrades, it's already dawn. We should hurry up and assign ourselves to a specific area to ensure he does not escape our grasp once more. The third brother spoke. The way I see things is that the 8 of us should go to the city lord and have him garrison some soldiers to help us. The rest of us will then guard the cardinal gates, as well as the other isolated areas of the city. This way, Jianchun cannot escape from us. Another elder spoke from the Jetta clan. The third brother nodded his head lightly. This is the only option left. I will go inform the city lord. The 7 of you should go spread out and guard your areas. We must maintain a strict guard. No matter who tries to leave, they must use clear water to wash their faces. This is to prevent Jianchun from changing his face. If anyone doesn't comply, be merciless. With the plan in place, everyone set out to accomplish their side of things. Within a large garden, a group of soldiers with torches held high could be seen patrolling the area. Just from their appearances, anyone could tell that this area did not belong to a regular person. Not too long after the guards had patrolled the area, a dark shadow suddenly appeared from the side. Within the guise of night, he entered without a sound into one of the empty rooms. This figure was Jianchun. After selecting an empty house to reside in, Jianchun strained his ears for any outside noises before settling down with the white tiger by his side. Taking out another Class 5 monster core, he began to recover his lost saint force. The white tiger seemed as if it had sensed the danger Jianchun was in. So on the way, the tiger cub had been very quiet as it remained around Jianchun's chest. Its eyes looked about the area in curiosity, and when they got to the empty house, it sat by Jianchun's side. Straining its ears as well, the cub didn't make another move. Time went by as the sun quickly hung high into the sky. By this point, Jianchun had fully recovered his strength and stood up to survey the area. This room hadn't been inhabited by a person for a very long time, so there was a layer of dust on the ground. Furthermore, the arrangements of the furniture were rather basic, as if meant for the next resident to do the arrangements when they moved in. After sitting in the room for several moments, Jianshen's eyes fell upon his space ring. With some hesitation, he grabbed another space ring and began to divide up his things. The ruler armaments, heaven-tier battle skill, and several other precious objects went into one space ring, while the other space ring contained several sets of clothes, some monster cores, and money. Then, Jianshen swapped out his space ring for the other one. The space ring with his more precious items went into a small box, which he began to find a hiding place for it. Since there were 8 Heaven Saint Masters surrounding the city, it was difficult to predict if he would survive or not, so he needed to prepare himself. One plan was to hide the more precious items in a space ring and place it in a concealed area. Even if he were to die, Jianshen had no desire to see the items be recovered by either the Jetta clan or Shi family. If he were to escape from this calamity, after everything had blown over, he could come back and retrieve the items. After locking the items within the box, Jianshen thought for a moment before hurriedly opening the box up once more. Taking the Duanyan sword and the seal of Treasure Mountain out, he placed them in a third space ring. He knew that the third brother of the Shi family had a method to find the ruler armaments, so he needed to separate them from the other precious items. Nightfall came by quickly, leaving the garden empty. Jianshen lightly opened the doors and escaped outside with the white tiger. In a moment, he came across the well used by the inhabitants of the building. Taking the space ring with the box in it, he tossed it into the well and headed back toward the room he was staying in. Leaping onto the beams of the building, Jianshen released a sharp amount of sword chi from his fingertips and dug a small finger-sized hole for the other space ring to be placed. Placing the space ring with the ruler armaments into this hole, Jianshen filled the hole back up, making it extremely hard to notice and utterly impossible for even the gods to know. After all of this was done, Jianshen let out a sigh in relief. Even if he were to be discovered, it would still not be easy for either of the two families. At daybreak, Jianshen changed his face again. He then hugged the obedient little white tiger against his chest and lightly rubbed its head as he said in a low voice, "Little tiger, I need to go scout around to figure out the situation, and can't bring you with me. You have to listen well and obediently stay here. Don't go running around, all right?" The tiger cub's bright eyes stared up at Jianshen, leaving him unsure of whether or not his words were understood. Ignoring the issue, Jianshen took out several milk bottles and left the tiger cub on the bed before leaving the room. Jianshen discreetly made his way onto the streets from the manor. By walking from the alleyway onto the main street, he made it seem like he was just another passerby. He then began to inspect the houses to see what type of area he was in. On the gates to the villa, a large board could be seen hanging overhead with the words, Huangpu Trading. Evidently, this area was heavily reliant on trading. Remembering the name of the villa, Jianshen left the area and began to wander around the city. A first-class city was far bigger and more luxurious than a second-class city. When one entered a first-class city, one would be able to see several rich and strong-looking mercenaries that were clearly not seen in such concentrated amounts anywhere else. Suddenly, a loud noise could be heard as a squadron of armored soldiers visited store after store as if searching for something. On the road, they continued to question everyone in such a manner that caused everyone to grumble in annoyance and confusion. Just then, a soldier blocked Jianshen's path. "Have you seen a person carrying a pure white magical beast anywhere?" "I have not." Jianshen's face didn't betray any emotions as he replied, "You may go. Remember, if you are to see either a snowy white magical beast or a man with perhaps an unnatural bulge, you are to immediately report this to the city lord." The soldier's face carried a serious look as he stared at Jianshen. "Yes, understood. If I see such a thing, I will make sure to notify the city lord straight away," Jianshen replied. After that, the soldier didn't pay any more attention to Jianshen and left him to interrogate someone else. After walking down 3 streets, Jianshen could see the same soldiers visit every single store or home and block off people to interrogate them. Carelessly, Jianshen wandered the streets before finally coming across the city gates. Instead of a steady stream of people walking in or out, there was a large congestion of merchants and travelers. Walking to the higher levels of one of the nearby restaurants, Jianchen could only see a large amount of soldiers guarding the city gates with several large vats of water. With each person that tried to enter or leave, the soldiers would use a wet rag to scrub at their faces. Even the rich and powerful were not exempt from this treatment, much to their anger. Seeing this, Jianchen couldn't help but smile bitterly. Right now this city was under the complete control of the Jetta clan and the Shi family. With this, they had set out an inescapable net all over the city. Chapter 367. Whereabouts revealed. In order to not rouse any suspicion, Jianchen left the restaurant after some time, and immediately went to go buy a Class 2 magical beast mount. After disguising himself as a mercenary, he set out for the other 3 gates to see if they were undergoing a similar situation. On the way, Jianchen had been stopped several times over by soldiers. Leisurely answering the questions, Jianchen could only secretly rejoice to himself about the fact that the soldiers did not require everyone within the city to wash their faces as well. Although his disguise was flawless almost to the point of perfection, it would not hold against water. If he were to be asked to wash his face, his disguise would wash away quickly. This entire day, Jianchen could only wander around the city in an attempt to figure out where the eyes and ears of the Jetta clan and the Shi family did not extend to. Although he could see many good places to hide within the city, none were long-term hiding spots. Within the official halls of Huangpu Trading, an elder around the age of 70 could be seen seated at the first spot. On both sides of him, around 20 younger men could be seen with strange glints in their eyes. The elder sitting at the first spot was the current patriarch of the Huangpu clan. With a bright glow in his eyes, he slowly spoke. The city is in a strange commotion today. All of the soldiers have been ordered and dispatched to search for a person with an unknown appearance within the city. I was just notified by the city lord that all of the clans within Moonlight City must comply with the city's operation. In the case that we find a person with a snowy white magical beast, or someone with an unnatural bulge, we are to report to the lord immediately. With that, the elder stopped speaking for a moment to look at a middle-aged man near him. Linda, you are the one in charge of our guards. In a moment go and take half our men to search the area under our control. Then take the other half to comb through our entire compound. In the case that he is spotted, do not let him escape, understood? Yes, Patriarch. The Huangpu clansman Linda replied before hesitating for a moment. Patriarch, this is only just a single person. Is it necessary to use so much of our resources to find him? That's right, Patriarch. I think this is strange as well. Just how could the city lord decree such an order like this? Using the entire garrison to search for a single person within the city, isn't this making a mountain out of a molehill? Straight away all of the men sitting down at the table burst into their own misgivings. The patriarch could only sigh. This was a sudden development for me as well. But the situation is far more dire than you all believe. If the city lord finds that the person they are looking for was spotted in our territory, or decides that we were hiding him on purpose, then the consequences will be severe, and our clan may disappear. Upon hearing this, the group of men sitting down instantly turned pale, as they all grew frightened at the consequences. Good, this meeting is settled then. Linda, go and lead the search yourself. Do not allow any accidents to happen, or any stone left untouched. Otherwise, the damage to our Huangpu clan will be far too severe for us to handle. The patriarch spoke with a serious look. Patriarch, you needn't worry, I, Linda, will take charge of this matter personally. As the Huangpu clan prepared to search for the person, every other minor or major clan in Mingyang City were doing the same thing. The entire atmosphere within the city had grown to a frantic height. Within the Huangpu clan, a squadron of guards came to the villa to search the place. Whether it was the garden or log house, they did not spare a single room from being searched. Without overlooking anything, they had even searched all of the high-ranking member rooms without exception. At this moment, one of the guards arrived at one of the abandoned rooms and began to search inside. Everyone be careful, do not allow even the cupboards to be untouched. Do not let a single detail escape from your eyes. One of the guards spoke out in warning. Suddenly, the room that Jian Chun had hidden in was opened with several guards walking in to start rifling around the place. Sensing the nearby danger, the white tiger cub silently curled up within the corner of the room, as both of its bright eyes stared out along with its ears straining to listen for any sound. At this time, the bedsheets that had fallen to the ground and covered the cub were ripped apart, revealing the face of one of the guards as he looked underneath the bed. It was very spacious below the bed, and despite the tiger cub's attempt to hide, its snowy white fur was far too eye-catching to escape detection. "Captain, I found something," the guard cried out instantly. Straight away, the captain came into the room with a grace face. "What is it?" "Captain, take a look under the bed." The guard crawled down and pointed. Crawling onto the ground to take a look, the captain soon discovered the white tiger cub that was desperately trying to hide. "Quickly, notify Overseer Linda." The captain's face grew shocked as he ordered the soldier next to him. In a flash, the Overseer Linda was notified, and the moment he saw the white tiger cub, his face grew unnaturally grim as he barked. "Take positions, search the perimeter. In the case you find someone suspicious, apprehend him immediately." "Yes," the guards all replied with equally serious expressions. Soon after, the white tiger cub had been brought to Linda, who then rushed it toward the patriarch's room. On the way, the white tiger cub had clearly shown its disapproval of Linda by biting and scratching at his arms and chest with a growling sound. Although the white tiger cub was not an ordinary beast and belonged to the ancient race of the winged tiger god, it had only just been born. Right now it was as frail as a newborn infant. Walking was already a hard task, and it did not have enough strength to protect itself. Within the main halls, the entirety of the upper-ranking members of the Huangpu clan had already gathered. Each one with them had a serious expression as they turned to look at the growling white tiger cub in the patriarch's hands. "Have you made your investigations? Who raised this tiger cub?" The Huangpu patriarch asked the entire group of people in front of him. The 20 men in front of him shook their heads slowly before Linda spoke. "Patriarch, I've already made inquiries. Within our Huangpu clan, not a single member has raised this beast. All of them haven't even heard of such a magical beast before. Since it's like that, then this magical beast must be the one the city lord is looking for. Linda, go and report this matter to the city lord's mansion straight away." The patriarch spoke gravely. Even after the city lord had heard the information, the entire city dared not rest. An elder was immediately dispatched to the Huangpu clan, and even the patriarch dared not to say anything out of line to him. This elder was the third brother of the Shi family, who had been waiting in the city lord's mansion for any information. Upon hearing that the cub had been found, the third brother had a small smile on his face. An entire body of snowy white fur, less than a meter tall and has wings. "It appears that this is the tiger that Jian Chun left behind. Haha, Jian Chun, you should know by now. I've already cast an inescapable net across the entire Moonlight City. You cannot escape." After an entire day, Jian Chun had already traversed the entire Moonlight City on the magical beast mount. The situation had been as he expected. All 4 gates were being tightly watched, and even the inhabitants were being interrogated. Everyone had been forced to wash their faces in order to leave the city, thus removing any idea Jian Chun had to escape the city with a disguise. His regular appearance had already been drawn and distributed throughout the city, so even if Jian Chun were to use his regular face, he would be spotted instantly. Jian Chun had rented a room within an inn, and had given the Class 2 magical beast mount to a waiter to look after. After waiting for nightfall, he slipped out of the inn without a word, and leaped back toward the Huangpu compound without being detected. Like a silent shadow jumping over the wall, he carefully ran toward the room where he had hidden the tiger cub. Creeping into the room, Jian Chun knelt down beside the floor and took out a night pearl from his space belt to light up the room. But the moment he looked underneath the bed, it was empty. The white tiger cub was nowhere to be seen. Jian Chun's face blanched as he immediately looked around the room with the night pearl giving him light. As he looked, he could see a series of footsteps on the dusty ground. Jian Chun's heart began to beat wildly as his mind came to a single conclusion. The white tiger cub had been captured. Within the semi-illuminated room, Jianchen clenched his fists tightly as his eyebrows furrowed together. Leaving the room, he immediately raced for the center hall of the compound. Chapter 368. No Way Out. Carefully advancing toward the center hall, Jianchen began to look around. Jianchen knew that his identity could be revealed at any moment, but he had to take back the tiger cub at any cost. He had promised Rum Guinness to look after her cub, so he could not allow anything to happen to the cub. Tonight had been especially quiet in the garden. With it also being very dark, and not that many patrolmen, Jianchen had been able to sneak around to the center hall, like a ghost in his pure black clothing. There was an utmost need for stealth, if he wanted to take back the tiger. Just as Jianchen drew close to the loft in the hall, a familiar sound could be heard in Jianchen's ears. It was the growling sound of the tiger cub. Hearing the cries of the tiger cub, Jianchen had a slight smile on his face, as he immediately began to search for where the sound was coming from. He didn't think that it would be that easy to find the cub. Suddenly, the entire area became brightly lit as torches appeared everywhere around Jianchen, and dyed the place a bright red. Jianchen, you really did return. I was thinking you were going to try and escape this time. An elderly voice could be heard all of a sudden, before a person walked out among the crowd. The person who had spoke wore a white robe, and had a benevolent smile to his face. It was the third brother of the Shi family, and right behind him were the high-ranking members of the Huangpu clan. In the hands of the patriarch was the tiger cub. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Upon seeing Jianchen, the tiger cub in the patriarch's hands grew excited, and began to flail its paws in an attempt to get to him. With a small but urgent growl, the four paws began to stamp onto the patriarch's chest, as if unwilling to be hugged by the patriarch any longer. Seeing that he had been discovered, Jianchen leaped out from the shadows after realizing they were useless. The patriarch of the Huangpu clan began to measure up Jianchen. From what he could see, this Jianchen was well under the age of 30, a youth in every sense of the word. Is this really the person the city lord and these respected men are after? The Huangpu patriarch thought. Jianchen gave a leveled glare at the Huangpu patriarch. Return the tiger cub to me. Ignoring Jianchen's request, the patriarch turned to the third brother of the Shi family. Although he was the patriarch of a clan, he knew that it was utterly compulsory that he listen to this elder in front of him. The third brother stared back at Jianchen evenly. Jianchen, I have put up with you long enough. Return the ruler armaments back to us immediately, or else do not blame us for our actions. Although you are extremely fast, we know you cannot keep it up for long. You cannot escape from us. Jianchen turned to the third brother with a laughing smile. I'm afraid that even after I return the ruler armaments to you, you will use them in return against me. I am no idiot. If you wish to take back the ruler armaments, you will have to come and get them. Go die then. The third brother's face grew exceedingly dark, as he lost the kindly expression on his face. With a frightening glint, he flew toward Jianchen with his saint weapon ready to pierce Jianchen's chest. Although Jianchen was extremely fast, he was still an Earth Saint Master in the end. Someone on that caliber of strength was no match for a Heaven Saint Master like the third brother. But when the third brother had taken action, so did Jianchen. Initializing both the illusionary flash and the Heaven's stolen fortune, his entire figure flickered away from existence before reappearing behind the patriarch. Taking back the cub, his feet smashed against the ground and disappeared from the area once again. A ripple of energy appeared behind Jianchen's back as he retreated. In that instant, the third brother had slammed against Jianchen's back with extreme force. PCH, Jianchen spat out a mouthful of blood before disappearing into the night. The third brother looked up to the sky, before letting out a whistle that sounded almost like a clap of thunder within the dark sky. Then, he flew into the sky and chased after Jianchen like a speeding arrow. The moment the other Heaven Saint Masters heard the whistle from their positions, they grew startled. Soaring into the sky, they began to look down as if preparing to ambush Jianchen at any given moment. With a plan like this, no matter where Jianchen went, he would be followed and blocked by any one of the Heaven Saint Masters. Half a moment later, The sound of the sound barrier breaking could be heard as one of the floating Kai brothers' eyes squinted. Staring with an amazing amount of focus, he could see a black figure flying at tremendous speeds toward his direction. The fourth Kai brother let out another whistle, signaling the others to begin the trap. After taking out his own saint weapon in preparations, all of the fire elements in the area around him began to gather. With a wave of his hand, a single 20-meter-long agglomeration of sword chi could be seen before it was sent flying straight for Jianchen. As he was escaping, Jianchen could suddenly felt a large concentration of sword chi being sent overhead. With a startled look, he immediately leaped from the streets onto the rooftop of a nearby building without losing a fraction of speed in his attempt to dodge. Bang! A large fire-red sword chi smashed into the ground with an explosive bang, filling the air with an intense heat that blew across the environment. All of the buildings nearby crumbled underneath its might, leveling the street. As for right where the sword chi had struck, there was a 10-meter wide, 20-meter deep crater. Jianchen's face maintained a grave expression as he looked at the crater. From this, he could tell the strength of this person was far stronger than the patriarch of the Moyin clan. The surrounding air around the Kai brother began to ripple with heat, as if a meteorite was streaking through the sky, before another attack of sword chi smashed into the ground where Jianchen was. Seeing that Jianchen's speed was far too much for him to keep up with, the elder quickly turned the entire place into an ocean of fire, so as to ignite even the air. The heat was so intense that it could melt steel. A Heaven Saint Master was already capable of manipulating the energy of the world. The fourth brother was capable of manipulating the fire elements in the world to form a 500-meter wide and 100-meter tall ocean of fire. Jianchen growled slightly under his breath as a ripple of saint force came out from within him to protect his entire body from the ocean of fire. At the same time, he used the illusionary flash to blow past the attack with another attempt to escape from the city. Suddenly, another 3 streaks of fire came across the sky like shooting stars with a fiery trail. Approaching quickly, the closest Heaven Saint Master had already burst outward with another attack of fire. By this point, Jianchen was already surrounded by the ocean of fire. It was 100 meters tall and covered the sky with its flame. There was nowhere in front that Jianchen could borrow for shelter, so he could only choose to continue leaping forward. The temperature within the sea of fire had been so hot that the saint force he had around his body instantly shattered and ignited his clothes on fire. It was so hot that even his hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes were on the verge of burning up. Resisting the magma like heat fire all around him, Jianchen continued to travel toward the exit of the sea of fire. Bang! Suddenly, a loud explosion could be heard as the sea of fire exploded, scattering light everywhere. The darkness of the night was illuminated for a brief moment, and those who were sleeping soundly were quickly awakened. Within the sea of fire still, Jianchen had suffered a tremendous hit. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, he managed to escape the radius of fire toward the city. The elder floating in the air began to gasp for breath with a pale face as he sighed. Even after using such an explosive wildfire, and using up almost all my energy, you weren't killed. But even that, you are still heavily damaged. I doubt that even you will get far now. At this moment, the other 3 brothers appeared by his side. One of them hurriedly spoke out. Brother, where is he? He escaped that way after him quick. The 4 brothers immediately gave chase. And not too long after, another azure glow could be seen streaking past the 4 brothers, and toward the direction where Jianchen had disappeared to. With his heavy injuries, Jianchen couldn't travel along the road fast enough, but it was still at a decent pace. An hour later, Jianchen arrived at a forest. Back during the ocean of fire, Jianchen had made sure to protect the tiger cub to the best of his abilities, so it had not been injured at all. With another mouthful of blood, Jianchen slowly tried to regain his breath. Right about now, he had used up 2/3 of his saint force, making it impossible for him to escape from the Heaven Saint Masters. Suddenly, an azure glow could be seen across the sky as the wind attributed Heaven Saint Master chased after Jianchen. Sighing to himself inwardly, Jianchen resigned himself to accepting that calamity will befall him. Petting the tiger wrapped up in his chest, Jianchen could only feel shame. He had promised Rum Guinness to take care of her child. But now that he was stuck in this situation, he had no more power to do so. Looking for a tree, Jianchen used his fists to rip apart a hole in its trunk. Carefully putting down the white tiger in it, he covered the hole back up to prevent anyone from noticing. Then turning around, he began to leave the area. He continued to run a little farther, so that they would be far enough away from the tiger cub. Jianchen stopped to catch his breath, and waited for the Heaven Saint Master to come. Right now he had given up on running away. The Heaven Saint Master was nearly upon him. It was time for him to repay them for the damage he had taken from the Sea of Fire. Chapter 369. A fusion of the azure and violet sword chi. Not too long after, an azure streak of light could be seen at the very end of the horizon. Flying toward Jianchen with a blinding speed, the Heaven Saint Master came to a stop in the air above Jianchen. Although it was dark outside, this would not impact a Heaven Saint Master at all. Jianchen, keep on running, why did you stop? The third elder spoke with a cold sneer 50 meters in the air. He was no longer the amiable person from before. After squandering so much time to catch Jianchen, the third elder had already lost his kindly temperament. Sitting down on the ground, Jianchen was currently using a Class 5 monster core to recover his strength. Even if he had decided on not running away, he did not plan on making it easy for the Heaven Saint Masters. At his death, there would be a heavy price to pay. The third elder floating above Jianchen calmly, without making a single move. The other members from the Jetta clan and Sher family weren't here yet, so he had no plans on making a move toward Jianchen. He had to make sure the rest of them would come first, so as to save face for the other clan and disrupt the relationship they had between them. An hour later, 2 of the Heaven Saint Masters from the Jetta clan and the remaining brothers of the Kai family arrived. The 8 Heaven Saint Masters then locked Jianchen within a ring, making escape impossible for him. Jianchen, return the Duanyan sword, and we will leave your body intact. The Jetta clan elder barked. Return the seal of Treasure Mountain, or else we will make sure that you will beg for death, roared another of the Kai brothers. Hearing these 2 men try to command him, Jianchen snorted as he leaped up and tossed the still undrained Class 5 monster core at the Kai brothers. If you wish for your ruler armament back, then come and take it. For such a mighty bunch of Heaven Saint Masters, you are unable to chase down a single Earth Saint Master. If it were not for my inadequate Saint force, you would have no chance of catching me. What a useless bunch. The 8 Heaven Saint Masters grew gray in the face as they heard Jianchen's words. They knew all too much already that not being able to catch a single Earth Saint Master was an undeniably shameful thing. Disgraceful child, allow me to see just what ability you have. The 4th elder barked out as he rushed toward Jianchen, with his yellow giant sword billowing outward with saint force. An explosive glare could be seen in Jianchen's eyes as he brought his awareness to the highest level possible. Using the spirit sword, the light wind sword instantly became a bright silver light that shot toward the 4th elder's throat with a sonic boom-like sound. It was as if the sword had reached the speed of light, flying through the air and leaving behind after images of itself. Almost no one could see it clearly thanks to its speed and the added bonus of the night. Caught off guard, the 4th elder had his throat pierced straight through with the sword, leaving behind a large hole. Straight after the sword left from the 4th elder's throat, it flew straight toward the 3rd elder 50 meters above the ground. The 3rd elder's eye released a refined glint as a large amount of saint force flooded out from his body, protecting him completely. The moment the sword made contact, its momentum began to slow down instantaneously before stopping completely. At the same time, a single machete appeared within the 3rd elder's hand. With an explosive bang, the air around the machete began to distort from the energy being gathered within it. Then with a grunt, the 3rd elder brought the machete smashing down upon Jianchen's light wind sword. Ding! With a crisp metallic sound, the light wind sword dropped down to the ground powerlessly. On the blade, there was a single crack. PFT. Jianchen sprayed out a mouthful of blood from the damage dealt to him. With his light wind sword connected to him, and being damaged while using the spirit sword, his senses had been harmonized with the weapon itself. Not only did the third elder's strike damage his saint weapon, but it had dealt a heavy blow to his spirit as well, causing a headache for Jianchen. Even after having a large hole blown through his throat, the fourth elder of the Shi family was like the ancestor of the Moyin clan and did not die. Instead, the fourth elder looked at Jianchen with a newfound fear. He had only been a few meters away from Jianchen and didn't have much time to prepare himself, but that instant had led to him being unable to defend himself against the light wind sword. If he was an Earth Saint Master, then he would have died instantly. Quick, hurry up and refine this. The third elder took out a pill. Instead of placing it within his mouth for the fourth elder to chew, he tossed it into the hole left behind by Jianchen. With difficulty, Jianchen managed to recall the light wind sword back to his hand. There was some pain in his heart as he gazed at the crack in his sword. The power contained within the machete of the third elder was far too much for his own sword to handle. Suddenly, a fire-red glow appeared above Jianchen's head, illuminating the area completely. Lifting his head up, Jianchen could only see the eldest Kai brother begin to manipulate the fire elements within the world before shooting it toward him. The amount of pure berserk energy swelling up from the blast scared even Jianchen. Throwing away his hesitation, Jianchen threw himself to the ground and rolled away right as the giant sword of fire slammed into the ground where Jianchen once stood. The entire ground began to shake before splitting apart to reveal a 30-meter-long fissure. Just as Jianchen stood back up, a strong gust of wind could be felt coming from behind him. One of the elders from the Jetta clan had suddenly appeared behind Jianchen to stab him with his water-attributed saint weapon. Turning around abruptly, Jianchen used the heaven-stolen fortune to multiply his strength 3 times over. The light wind sword in his hand began to glow with an azure and violet light as it struck against the other elder's saint weapon. Following another explosive boom, Jianchen spat out another mouthful of blood as he was thrown back down to the ground. Each and every Heaven Saint Master here was far stronger than the Moyin clan ancestor, and with Jianchen's strength nearly running dry, he was in no position to take a single blow from any of them. Cough! Jianchen continued to spit out blood as his face turned paler and paler. A large amount of blood had already escaped his body, and with so many severe blows, his fighting strength was all but gone. Brat, I'll make sure that you will beg for death. A coarse voice could be heard as the fourth elder of the Kai family coughed out the words with difficulty. Landing on the ground, he took out his saint weapon and stalked toward Jianchen. Biting his lip, Jianchen struggled to climb back up and clasp onto his weapon. After taking on the blow from the Jetta clan elder, several more cracks appeared on his sword. Even if I die, I won't allow you all to claim my life so easily. Despite the heavy injuries, Jianchen still had a resolute glare in his eyes. A faint glow of azure and violet appeared on his sword once more, covering the entirety of his sword. However, this time, the 2 colors began to meld together. As the fourth elder drew close to Jianchen, he swung the sword horizontally in an attempt to behead Jianchen. A crazed expression overtook Jianchen's eyes as he clutched his sword tightly. In that split moment, the combined azure and violet light began to shake for a moment before the lights started to flicker and fully harmonize with each other. Just as the 2 sword chi fused with each other, an eye-piercing light shot forth from the light wind sword. No longer was the light purely azure or violet, it was now the 2 colors combined. There was azure in the violet, and violet in the azure, as if the 2 were one the entire time. Suddenly, an unbelievably strong amount of sword chi appeared, and filled up the entire area. In a second, the entire world seemed as if it belonged to this realm of the sword. No matter where anyone went to, all they could feel was the overwhelming power of sword chi. This amount of sword chi was almost unbelievable to imagine. It allowed anyone to believe that it was strong enough to set the heavens aflame, or even destroy the firmament of the heavens. But in the light wind sword, there was still a minute crack to be seen. This scene had caused all 8 of the Heaven Saint Masters to grow aghast at this unexpected change. Their eyes began to widen as they stared at the explosive light pouring out from the light wind sword with a mystified look. When it came to the sword chi, all they could feel was dread. Just what is this energy? The eldest Kai brother's voice began to tremble with fear. Suddenly, a gentle gust of wind blew across the 8 Heaven Saint Masters, reducing parts of their clothes to tiny fragments. Blade marks began to appear all over their bodies, and even their hair was reduced to tiny pieces, as if grounded into powder. Slowly, blood began to appear from their wounds and dyed their entire body with its redness. The entire air around the area was no longer the same simple air. It was now imbued completely with sword chi. When the light wind had blown across their bodies, it was the same as being struck with countless blades of sword chi. Even if they were to breathe in a breath of air, their inner organs and viscera would be instantly cut apart by the sword chi gathered around them. With the fusion of the azure and violet sword chi, the entire area had become a realm ruled by the sword. This was a domain where only the sword chi remained supreme. Each of the 8 Heaven Saint Masters were utterly breathless. Shortly afterward, they began to release a large amount of saint force within their bodies in an attempt to protect themselves from the sword chi that was looming all around them. "Quick, kill him!" The third elder spoke with unconcealed fear and a trembling voice. Chapter 370, Eternal Damnation. "Quick, kill him!" The third elder spoke with unconcealed fear and a trembling voice. The third elder's words seemed to have a rousing effect on everyone. Instantly snapping out of their stupor, they all began to charge at Jian Chen. The closest person to Jian Chen was the fourth elder, whose eyes radiated with a fierce glow. Just as he stalked toward Jian Chen to swing his sword, a sudden change overcame his face. This was because he had unexpectedly felt his body being squashed with an unknown amount of pressure from the surrounding air. Like an invisible restraint, he was unable to break free from his confines no matter just how much force he put into his movements. Jian Chen's eyes began to dilate with a strange craze to them. He would not hesitate at all to pay a heavy price if it meant fighting with all his strength. Waving the light wind sword in his right hand, he stabbed the azure and violet sword chi-infused light wind sword toward the fourth elder's saint weapon. Ding! As if his saint weapon was tofu, the fourth elder's saint weapon shattered into 2 pieces. With a muffled cry, a large amount of blood came out of his mouth as his face grew deathly pale. Even after breaking apart the fourth elder's saint weapon, Jian Chen didn't have the luxury of being surprised. With a wave of his hand, he brought the light wind sword down and stabbed it straight through the elder's chest. Ah! The fourth elder let out a miserable shriek of pain as the azure and violet sword chi stabbed into his body. It was as if an unbelievable amount of power was erupting within him as the fused sword chi shot throughout every point in his body. In an instant, his entire body became mutilated and his bones reduced to dust. By this point, the remaining Heaven Saint Masters had already shot down with their sword chi aimed at Jian Chen. Abruptly turning around, Jian Chen's light wind sword tore apart the skies with sword chi as it defended itself against the other attacks. Wherever the sword moved, a black fissure followed. When the 7 Heaven Saint Masters' sword chi struck against the fused sword chi of Jian Chen, not a single of them could predict that their attacks would dissipate into the void. Fourth Elder. Upon seeing the mutilated body of the fourth elder, the third elder's teeth nearly fractured under the intense grinding. Fury overtook his face as he roared out in anguish. Even now, Jian Chen continued to spit out blood. Even his pores had started to leak with it. Not only was the light wind sword in his hand fractured, but several cracks in Jian Chen's skin could be seen, slowly oozing blood onto the outside surface. The amalgamation of the azure and violet sword chi amazed everyone with its power. However, with Jian Chen's current strength, he was unable to control this powerful source of energy. Since Jian Chen wasn't able to control it, he suffered from the repercussions. If this went on for any longer, even if he didn't die from the Heaven Saint Masters, then he would perish by the repercussions. The longer Jian Chen wielded the fused azure and violet sword chi, the stronger the repercussions would be. The torment on both his mind and body had caused Jian Chen to howl out almost animalistically. Leaping into the air with reckless abandon, he charged toward the closest Heaven Saint Master and scattered the light from his sword onto him. The moment the Heaven Saint Master had the sword pointed at him, he suddenly froze in place. Feeling the attack of Jian Chen, the eldest Kai brother blanched as he tried to retreat back, only to feel terrified when he realized that he was stuck in place. Even the space around him seemed to have frozen in place, as he stood firmly in place, without being able to budge. Overwhelmed with shock and terror, the eldest brother immediately tried to use his inner saint force in order to break free of his constraints. In the end, it was futile. He made no advancements anywhere. Right in front of the terrified eyes of the eldest brother, Jian Chen's light wind sword speared straight through his chest before the fused sword qi exploded within his body. In an instant, his entire body exploded into small pieces of flesh and bone, before the eldest brother could even scream. And thus, the eldest Kai brother had his life extinguished. PCH. After killing the eldest brother, Jian Chen let out yet another mouthful of blood. The repercussions were already reaching the limits of what Jian Chen could handle. Blood was starting to drip from all 7 openings on his heads, and combined with his extremely pale face, this visage made him seem like a horrifying ghost. Eldest brother. Eldest brother. Eldest brother. As soon as their eldest brother died, the other 3 brothers' eyes grew bloodshot with anger and disbelief. Blast it all, just what energy is this? How could it be this strong? We must kill him quickly, or else we are all in danger. An elder from the Jetta clan cried out. We cannot delay any longer, unleash your battle skills. The 3rd elder spoke in a serious tone. 2 Heaven Saint Masters had already died by Jian Chen's hand. This was a result that he had not expected. He had never heard of an Earth Saint Master that could kill a Heaven Saint Master. With a mutual look at each other, the 2 elders from the Jetta clan immediately began to utilize their Heaven tier battle skills, while the 3rd elder began to make his move as well. Jian Chen, you shall pay for the death of our eldest brother with your life. The 3rd brother roared out loud in righteous fury, as he began to use an advanced Earth tier battle skill, along with his other 2 brothers. With the Heaven Saint Masters all using their battle skills, the combined power was far greater than the Heaven tier battle skill Ming Dong had used. With just the 3 Earth tier battle skills, an oppressive amount of power forced itself onto Jian Chen's body, causing him to gasp as his bones began to crack under the pressure. In the form of a large long-ranged attack, the 3 brothers of the Kai family released a flame that seared across the skies and shot toward Jian Chen. Jian Chen let out a howl to the heavens as he focused all of his strength into his right arm and brought his light wind sword smashing down onto the attack aimed at him. The fused sword qi had devoured the attack from the 3 brothers and instantly shattered their saint weapons at the same time. At the very moment their weapons broke, the 3 brothers' blood instantly filled the sky. The glow on Jian Chen's sword began to dissipate now that Jian Chen had reached his limit and could no longer handle either the fused sword qi or the repercussions that came along with it. Suddenly, the weather began to grow unstable as a single layer of black clouds began to descend down from the skies. Several flashes of lightning could be seen crackling within the clouds as well. The atmosphere began to grow tense as the entire area was slowly consumed by this new source of power. Following soon after, an unbelievably strong amount of pressure descended upon Jian Chen, forcing his bones to crack and shatter. Facing the sky with an even paler face, Jian Chen could only see the 2 elders from the Jetta clan and the 3rd elder from the Shi family protect themselves with a layer of saint force. Floating high in the sky, the 3 Heaven Saint Masters were using their Heaven tier battle skills at the same time with a power so large that they had influenced the weather itself. A sharp stinging pain could be felt all over Jian Chen's body as he struggled to keep himself standing upright with a victorious smile. He had already pulled 2 Heaven Saint Masters to their deaths and shattered the saint weapons of the 3 remaining Kai brothers. If he could take their battle skills, then even death would be worth it. In a flash, the preparation time for the 3 Heaven Saint Masters came to an end. In the next moment, 3 rays of dazzling light could be seen jetting toward Jian Chen with a speed that shook the air around them. The 3 Heaven Saint Masters were all extremely cautious and did not want to use their saint weapons to clash with Jian Chen. Unconsciously, Jian Chen had readied his already fractured light wind sword up in a guard stance. Following a loud bang, the 3 Heaven Saint Masters' battle skills struck Jian Chen's weapon and body. Without any sort of resistance, Jian Chen's light wind sword shattered. filling the air with the pieces of the sword. It began to transform back into the energy of the world and return to the void. Like a kite without an anchor, Jian Chen's body was blown back 50 meters and fell to the floor ruthlessly. It had taken him another 20 meters before his body had came to a rest after tumbling like a ball in motion. There was already a large hole in the cavity of his chest, leaving behind just plain air where his inner organs should be. From head to toe, Jian Chen's body was covered with blood, and not a single part of his body was left untouched by blood. An azure streak of light could be seen as the third elder flew to Jian Chen's side. He had no plans on going easy on Jian Chen, and immediately stabbed into his heart with his machete, running through his chest completely. The light in Jian Chen's eyes began to grow dimmer. He couldn't help but struggle to keep his eyes open before ultimately closing them for good. In the next moment, Jian Chen's consciousness returned to a formless state. His own spirit had already begun to depart from the world, and his senses grew dull to the outside world. At the final moments before his spirit would disappear for good, Jian Chen couldn't help but think back to memories of his mother Bai Yuntian, his father Changyang Ba, his eldest brother Changyang Hu, his eldest sister Changyang Mingyue, his fellow student Tai Ta from Kargath Academy, and the close friends he had made, Qin Xiao and Ming Dong. Is this the feeling of death? Mother, I'm sorry. Your child was not able to pay respect to you in the end. Eldest brother, second sister. Thank you for taking care of me in the past. In the next life, I, Jian Chen, will definitely repay you. Captain Kendall, forgive me. I couldn't fulfill your final wishes. Ming Dong, Qin Xiao, my brothers. This is goodbye. I won't be seeing you again. Jian Chen's mind continued to flash with memory after memory, as his state of mind grew even more chaotic. He could tell that his time was growing to an end. Chapter 371. Escape from calamity. The two Jetta clan elders, and the third elder from the Shi family, all gathered by Jian Chen's body. Although they had managed to kill Jian Chen, their faces did not seem very healthy. That was because they were still frightened out of their minds from the battle. The frightful amount of energy that Jian Chen managed to release and used to kill the fourth elder and the eldest brother of the Kai family was quick and simple. In the end, even the three Kai brothers had their saint weapons destroyed. This was a show of power that was far beyond what a sixth cycle heaven saint master could accomplish. This left the three remaining survivors terrified since Jian Chen was only an earth saint master. Jian Chen's final burst of energy came from nowhere. Just how strong was that blast? One of the Jetta clan members gravely asked. Silently, the third elder began to ponder for a moment. Jian Chen is quite the strange individual. He must have cultivated some sort of secret technique that is unknown to us. It would appear Jian Chen is no ordinary figure. Let us hope that no strong clan supports him. The other Jetta clan member worriedly spoke. That is unlikely. If Jian Chen truly did have a strong clan secretly supporting him, someone would have come to his rescue when we were chasing him ages ago. It is my guess that Jian Chen was fortunate enough to come across moments where he had gained unbelievable power boosts. The third elder spoke. That's true. We've killed him already, so there is no need to talk about this. Let's take back our ruler armaments then. Most likely, Jian Chen's space ring will hold items of value. If we come across some sort of extraordinary battle skill or miraculous cultivation method, I propose that both of our clans share it in order to avoid a monopoly. The elder from the Jetta clan spoke. Without any hesitation, the third elder replied. Of course. For now, let us take Jian Chen's space ring and take back what is ours. The third elder didn't wish to take Jian Chen's space ring without the consent of the other two factions, since his space ring would also contain the property of the Jetta clan. After the two elders from the Jetta clan nodded their heads, the third elder took Jian Chen's space ring. Silently he put up his guard against the other two elders. He carefully began to inspect Jian Chen's space ring. After a while, the third elder's face blanched as he cried out in shock. This is terrible, the ruler armaments aren't inside. What? The two elders cried out in shock as well. Let me see. One of the elders took the space ring from the third elder's hand and began to rifle through it impatiently before his expression became extremely ugly. "That scoundrel!" the elder cried as he flung the space ring to the ground with a displeased look. The third elder looked at Jian Chen's body with a furious look. "What a rogue Jian Chen is! With the ruler armaments hidden, they will be difficult for us to find them. This is troublesome. Where could the ruler armaments be? If they are within a space ring, it has to be within 10 meters for our secret method to sense it. Is it possible that we'll be forced to plead the ancestor to use his energy to search for the missing ruler armaments?" The second elder from the Jetta clan spoke as he glared daggers at Jian Chen. The third elder let out a sigh as he slowly tried to calm himself. "Back in Mercenary City, I could still detect that the seal of Treasure Mountain was located on Jian Chen. It would appear that after leaving Mercenary City, he was able to hide them somewhere. Finding a ring that doesn't emit any energy fluctuations within such a large area would be as hard as scaling the heavens. It appears that we can only report this matter back to the clan. Let them hire a few people to trace Jian Chen's steps to look for it. If they really cannot find it, then the ancestor will have to squander some of his strength to recall his ruler armament." The Jetta clan elder said. "That's the only thing we can do." After the three men had discussed what to do, the two elders from the Jetta clan quickly left the area. They had to make sure this information would get back to the clan quickly. After they left, the third elder took the three crippled brothers and the two corpses before leaving as well. Jian Chen's body gradually began to lose heat as his life continued to fade away. Right now, even his powerful soul was already close to disappearing due to all of the serious wounds he had sustained. The third elder had even stabbed through his head with his machete. If this had been anyone else, they would have died long ago. The world began to grow dark, and the surroundings grew quiet. Only a mess remained where Jian Chen had fought, like evidence of how bitter the great fight had been. Suddenly, an azure and violet glow began to drift up from Jian Chen's body. These were the two sword spirits that had resided within Jian Chen's dantian. They were trying to escape from Jian Chen's body and to the outside world. And within the two glows was a single stone that continued to shine a bright, multicolored spectrum that was dazzling to the eye. It was the multicolored stone that Jian Chen had bought back in Walorant City. The volume of the stone has already shrunk down to the size of a finger. The azure and violet sword spirits and the multicolored stone began to float toward Jian Chen's eyebrows. Slowly descending downward, the multicolored stone began to fuse into the space between Jian Chen's eyebrows before disappearing from view. The moment the sword spirits entered Jian Chen's head, an indescribable amount of attraction could be felt, pulling Jian Chen's drifting soul back into his head. Thanks to the sword spirits, Jian Chen's incessantly dissipating soul temporarily stabilized. Afterward, the three began to combine together in Jian Chen's conscious, fusing with Jian Chen's soul. An hour later, a figure could be seen flying through the air. When he passed this area, he suddenly stopped in midair, then quickly descended to where Jian Chen's body lay. Giving the body a quick look, the figure couldn't help sharply inhale as he muttered, "What a tenacious life force. With even his head stabbed, his soul has yet to fade away. Bah, since you're not dead with such serious injuries, I'll take you home." With that, the man waved his hand and enveloped Jian Chen with a gentle saint force, bringing him along through the air. Chapter 372. A tragic sight on the second day after Jian Chen's defeat. A tree trunk concealed by several branches in the forest began to shake for a moment before a white-maned winged tiger came crawling out of the tree. Both of its shiny eyes looked around its surroundings before letting out a growl. After looking in every direction and mewling for half the day, the white tiger cub began to sniff the area before heading in the direction of Jian Chen. The tiger cub was extremely young, and its paws couldn't support its own weight for an extended period of time. So it could only run for a short amount of time before resting and continuing the pattern. After an unknown amount of time, Jian Chen's muddled head began to clear up as he tried to open his eyes with difficulty. The very first thing he noticed was a wooden roof. Although it was a bit worn down, it was still quite clean. Suddenly, a wave of pain attacked Jian Chen's head, causing him to cry out in pain. Because of the inexplicable pain in his head, Jianchen's face grew deathly pale without a hint of blood to be seen. The muscles on his face couldn't help but quiver as he felt the room begin to shake before Jianchen's head fell to the side, and he lost consciousness. Not too long after Jianchen had fainted, a creaking sound could be heard as the wooden door to the room creaked open, and a fat male around the age of 20 years old appeared. The male walked over to Jianchen's bed, but the moment he saw Jianchen's sleeping posture, his hand reached to scratch his own head. Strange. I could have sworn I heard a sound. How has he not awoken yet? It's been 3 days already. With that, the fatty left the room. For 3 days straight, the white tiger cub continued to stumble and crawl on the road, climbing across steep mountains, and even falling down from them. The white tiger cub didn't even get a scratch on its tender skin. The only change was that its fur was gray in color with the dust. After 3 days of dangerous traveling, the white tiger cub had finally arrived at the battleground where Jianchen and the Heaven Saint Master had fought. Sniffing the area, the tiger cub began to growl out loud with an urgent tone, as if it was crying with grief. Running with all of its might toward a large patch of dried blood, the ground even had bits and pieces of Jianchen's body. Letting out another roar in sadness, the tiger cub looked around the area once more before sniffing the bloody patch of ground. Then, with a small nudge of its nose, the tiger cub took a piece of Jianchen's inner organs and put it into its mouth. Although the tiny part of the inner organ had already withered up, there was still a large concentration of energy within it. After eating the body piece, the white tiger cub began to feel a large amount of energy within its 4 limbs. It was as if it had enough energy to support its entire body. There was enough to the point where the tiger cub could feel several sharp fangs starting to grow within its mouth. As the tiger cub continued to eat the remaining parts left behind by Jianchen, it continued to howl in sadness. Not too long afterward, the entire area had been cleaned up by the tiger cub. By this point, while there was no significant change in the tiger cub's body, its ability to move around had grown significantly. All 4 of its limbs were sturdy and strong, and it no longer had the same difficulty moving anymore, nor were its movements awkward. Opening its mouth, the cub took one bite of the nearby dirt before spitting it back out. The originally bloody dirt had returned to its original state, as if there had been no blood in the first place. After 10 hours, the white tiger cub had fully cleaned up the area, so that not a single speck of Jianchen's blood remained. Not only Jianchen's blood had been taken, but even the opposing Heaven Saint Masters had been absorbed. For the tiger cub, the amount of energy remaining in their blood was like a tonic for it. After absorbing all of the energy, the white tiger cub had grown even stronger. Even the sharp fangs in its mouth had grown bigger and sharper. Once all of the blood was absorbed, the white tiger cub continued to circle around the area, with its nose constantly sniffing. Finally, it broke out into a run that made it look like it was flying as the wings on its back unfolded almost like it was preparing to fly. A series of pictures began to flow through the chaotic space in Jianchen's unconscious mind, one after the other in the form of a grotesque gas. Sometimes he would see a white-haired elder. Sometimes he would see a red cloud that tore through the air itself with its lightning. Sometimes, it was the 2 azure and violet sword spirits appearing as if they were lovers as they flew through the sky and danced with the metallic song of swords. Occasionally, the figure of a single crane-haired elder could be seen wielding the 2 azure and violet deity swords as he flew through the air and decimated magical beast after magical beast. At times, the 2 deity swords fused into one and created chaos throughout the world, destroying both enemies and the world itself. Then, Jianchen saw the azure and violet deity swords shatter apart into the world and slowly disappear into a mountain range. After an unknown amount of time, Jianchen opened his eyes once more as he woke up. Immediately, a dizzying sensation began to occur in his head once more, but it wasn't as severe as the first wave. Therefore, this time Jianchen did not fall unconscious. Staring blankly all around him, Jianchen could see that he was currently resting upon a bed in a wooden house. His back was up against a wooden bed and footprints could still be seen on the floor. The room itself wasn't all that big, and was roughly 8 meters wide with very little furniture. Where is this place? Jianchen began to look around himself with confusion, but when he tried to climb out of the bed, more pain struck and snaked up his body, racking his nerves. The sudden intense pain caused Jianchen to cry out once more and break out into a cold sweat. His originally healthy red face once again turned pale. Gritting his teeth, Jianchen lifted his head with difficulty to observe his surroundings. This time, he immediately froze in place as he saw a 30-centimeter hole in his chest, nearly separating his entire body into two in a grotesque shape. There was dried blood everywhere around the wound. This wound would horrify any person. Seeing the situation he was in, a tidal wave of memories began to charge forth into his mind from when he was battling the 8 Heaven Saint Masters. Did I not die? Jianchen's expression was rather dazed, but he soon regained himself as a joyous look overcame him. I didn't die, I really didn't die. Jianchen couldn't hold in the emotions within himself. As soon as his body began to tremble, the wound in his chest began to act up, causing Jianchen to grit his teeth together. After a moment, the pain abated, leaving Jianchen to collapse back onto the bed weakly gasping for breath. Laying there quietly without any energy, he began to think about his condition. A clear image of his current state could be seen within his mind. His perspective was a lot stronger than what it was before, but he couldn't feel happy about that just yet, and neither could he feel anything in his current state. Right now, the situation that had happened to him had left him in shock. His current situation was extremely grave. It was practically a total mess. All of his organs were on the verge of failing, and even his heart was shattered. But even after such a serious blow, he had not died. But that had not been the most serious thing. The true extent of the damage that Jianchen suffered was from the light wind sword which broke after years of bitter cultivation. Although his dantian had not yet disappeared, there were no signs of the sword spirits. Even his saint weapon had been broken without a trace. The dantian had lost all source of his energy, meaning all of his cultivation had been lost irrevocably. Jianchen had been utterly dumbfounded. After losing his saint weapon, he had gone from a talented genius of renown to becoming a cripple. This was an incredibly serious blow to him. Could it be? Am I now a cripple? Jianchen continued to stare at the ceiling with a dazed look. His eyes were filled with an unwillingness. This was because he had far too many things to accomplish still. And in order to accomplish them, he would need a tremendous amount of power. Creak! At that moment, the door suddenly creaked open as a middle-aged man walked through the doors. He was around 40 years old with a steady face, and wore clothes that were patched all over. Despite the poor clothing, they did nothing to hide his unordinary air. You're awake. The man stared at Jianchen. Regaining his senses, Jianchen looked at the middle-aged man listlessly. I thank you for rescuing me. The man walked toward Jianchen and stopped at his bedside with a smile. You are truly tenacious in order to take such a fatal blow without dying. If this were anyone else, even a Heaven Saint Master would have died. The man suddenly stopped talking for a moment. The wounds you suffered were horrifying, to say the least. Even your inner organs were crushed. Aside from a high-leveled Heaven Saint Master healing you, it will be incredibly difficult to heal your wounds. Jianchen was silent as he took in the information. With his saint weapon destroyed, he had lost all of his martial abilities. Seeing the look of daze in Jianchen's eyes, the middle-aged man sighed. Kid, think for a moment. Even if you were crippled, you can still live an ordinary life. Although it will be difficult to do anything marvelous, you'll learn to deal with it. I'll go ask my father later for a radiant saint pill, so that you can heal faster. Chapter 373. Soul Aberration. Once the middle-aged man left, the room descended into a quiet calm. The only thing that could be heard was the faint breathing of Jianchen as he looked up at the ceiling. His saint weapon had been broken. Years of bitter cultivation and hard work. It had all been lost in the most dire situation of his life. This was a blow that was unbearable for him. He wanted to go home. He wanted to enact his revenge upon the Huayan sect. There was just too many things he wanted to do. But to do all of them, strength would be needed. Yet now he had degenerated to a cripple. Legends had it that even if a cripple were to reincarnate, it would still take a tremendous amount of time and effort to become an Earth Saint Master. The Jessin Kingdom was at its moment of peril as well, meaning that there was an unknown amount of time before even the Changyang clan would no longer be able to hold on. He couldn't try risking the chances of being reincarnated again. At that moment, the doors to the room opened up as a simple-looking fat man around 20 years old came walking in with simple clothing. The fat man walked to Jian Chen's side and looked at the open eyes of Jian Chen with a pleasant smile. "Ah, you're finally awake. You've been asleep for several days already." The depressed Jian Chen looked as if he hadn't heard a single word from the fatty and continued to look up toward the ceiling in a daze. Seeing the listless expression on Jian Chen's face, the fatty had a suspicious look on his face. Looking up toward the ceiling, he then waved a hand over Jian Chen's eyes. "Hey, are you alright? Why are you looking up there? Is there anything good to look at up there?" Jian Chen didn't reply, and his pupils hadn't registered any movements either. Scratching at his head, the fatty's eyebrows creased together as he muttered, "I heard from father that you were on the verge of death, but your spirit had yet to disappear. Did your soul take some sort of damage and turn you into a vegetable?" The fatty extended an arm out to rouse Jian Chen from his stupor, but the moment he saw the frightful wound on Jian Chen's chest, his hand froze in midair. With such a wound like this, shaking your body would definitely hurt. No, I can't do that. Hey, are you okay or not? Can you even hear the words coming out of my mouth?" Both of the fatty's eyes stared at Jian Chen's face with an expectant look. Then, Jian Chen's eyes registered something as they swiveled toward the fatty before speaking softly. "Who are you? Haha, so you finally speak, and you're not a vegetable after all. I was wondering if you had any questions." The fatty beamed before introducing himself. "Hello, I am Xiao Tianyu, but everyone in the village calls me Little Fatty, so feel free to call me either name. Do you still remember your name?" "I am Jian Chen." Jian Chen spoke with some difficulty, before turning back to look at the ceiling once more. "Whoa, so you even know your name still. That's good. You haven't suffered any retardation." The fatty spoke with a pleasant smile as if Jian Chen not becoming a retard was a good thing. The fatty stilled as he looked at the wound on Jian Chen's chest with curiosity. "Jian Chen, just what type of magical beast did you fight in order to gain those wounds? Do you want me to have my dad to bring it back?" "You don't need to worry, my father is extremely powerful. He'd definitely bring it back, and you can have your revenge." "Hey, why are you quiet again? Do you not like talking or what?" Hey, just what's so good looking on the ceiling that makes you stare at it so much? I built this room 2 years ago. Is it not up to your standards or something?" "Hey, Jian Chen, say something. Do you not like hearing me talk?" But Jian Chen didn't say another word, and continued to stare at the ceiling in a stupor, while the fatty continued to speak into his ear. "Tianyu!" A voice rang out as the previous middle-aged man from before entered the room. "Dad, you're back. Why is he looking at the ceiling so much? He doesn't look like he has become an idiot." The fatty began to plead to his father for an answer. With a light voice, the man replied, "Tianyu, this man has suffered wounds that he has not healed from. Let him rest for now." "Oh, I get it. Then Dad, I'll be leaving now," the fatty said before leaving the room. The middle-aged man walked toward Jian Chen's bed and handed him a round-looking pill. "I know you've suffered an unbearable amount of damage, but don't think about it too much for now. Just focus on your recuperation. Living is the most important thing." He spoke before inserting the white-colored pill into Jian Chen's mouth. "This is a Class 8 Radiant Spirit pill. Although it cannot heal your wounds completely, it'll at the very least patch up the hole in your chest." With that, he left the room once more. Jian Chen's entire body was then enveloped by a milky white glow as the Radiant Saint Force within the pill began to leak out. The amount of Radiant Saint Force in the pill was so strong that even Jian Chen at his peak would still barely be able to match up to even a single %. This was the difference in quality. With Jian Chen's entire body enveloped in Radiant Saint Force, his wounds began to heal at tremendous speeds, forcing even the hole in his chest to regenerate with new skin. Not too long after, the hole had been covered over by new skin. At the same time, The internal wounds that Jianchen had taken were starting to heal. Even the withered skin began to fall off as new tender-looking skin replaced it, revealing a white and sleek shine almost. Not a single scar could be seen on his body. In a little bit, Jianchen's body looked as if it was entirely new. Not a single wound could be seen on his body, making him seem almost perfect. Slowly, the radiant saint force began to dissipate from his body. While it looked like Jianchen was fully healed on the surface, his internal wounds were still quite severe. The Class 8 Radiant Spirit Pill was extremely potent in nature, but there just wasn't enough quantity. Thus, it was not able to fully heal Jianchen. Despite this, Jianchen had been moved. His previously listless eyes began to recover with emotions, as he felt the changes happen within his body. With a hoarse voice he muttered, "How would I regain my strength? I need to recover all of it, but how?" Suddenly, Jianchen's mind felt a jolt. It was at this moment that he realized that his own mind obtained a few more things, and that his own soul had grown stronger. Sensing the changes within his body, Jianchen was startled. Quickly calming himself down, he closed his eyes and began to envision himself inside his mind. The mindscape of his mind was chaotic in nature. Nothing could be seen clearly, but in the center, the azure and violet lights could be seen floating around with the multicolored stones slowly revolving around them. These are the sword spirits. How did they get here? What even is this place? Jianchen's eyes widened in surprise as he looked at the sword spirits. Suddenly, the sword spirits shook as a stream of consciousness flowed from them. All of their knowledge, thoughts, and ideas began to be transmitted into Jianchen, without a single sound by a mysterious manner, as if it wanted to be comprehended by Jianchen. This is my consciousness. Jianchen realized what the two sword spirits were relaying to him. Soon after, the two sword spirits continued to relay information to Jianchen via the same mysterious manner. After a while, Jianchen understood what the circumstances were for him. So I died, but because of the sword spirits, my soul was rescued by them. And now my soul is fused with the two sword spirits. Finally understanding the entire picture, he didn't know if he was happy or worried about what had occurred. After conversing with the sword spirits, he knew that they had fused with his soul to form a special existence. But he didn't know whether or not it was still his soul, or if it was now the sword spirits. After pondering it for a while, Jianchen calmed down. While this result was extremely shocking and hard to believe, his soul had truly merged with the sword spirits while they retained all of their wisdom. While the two had fused, both sides were capable of independent thinking. This was truly a mysterious existence. Just what's going on here? How did I transform into such an odd state? Jianchen began to mutter to himself. To him, this situation was far too incredible. Another stream of thought came out from the sword spirits once more. I am me, and the sword spirits are the sword spirits. They had only used such a strange method to save and preserve my life. Jianchen understood the meaning behind the stream of thought. It felt as if no time had passed within his conscious. It was as if the entire area had gone still. But instead of remaining in this area, Jianchen began to retreat from his mind after he had received the answers to his questions. The moment Jianchen had opened his eyes, he took in the sight around him. It was only then that Jianchen had truly taken notice that his soul had grown inexplicably stronger. He could easily sense anything within a kilometer from his position. It was only because he was depressed at first that he felt as if there was no such change from his soul. Chapter 374. A new power, so my soul has grown even stronger now. Jianchen thought with surprise. However, he wasn't completely happy. Even after his soul had grown stronger, the only thing that had changed was his ability to perceive things, nothing else. Suddenly, Jianchen's entire body trembled slightly as he closed his eyes and began to meditate. All sorts of energy from his surroundings was felt through Jianchen's perception. At this moment, Jianchen's world had exploded with beautiful colors from every spectrum. He could see just about any color imaginable to the human eye. There was the faint glow of white, the dark color of black, the dull shine of red, the heavy shade of yellow, the rich blue, and the lively green. Seeing such a rich world of color, Jianchen was stunned. These colors were the 6 elements of the world that he was never able to perceive before. In the past, aside from the radiant saint force or the world energy, he couldn't detect any other element. But now, he could sense the other 5 elements along with the radiant saint force. With such a sight like this, Jianchen couldn't help but think that he was dreaming. Could this be what happened when the sword spirits fused with my soul? Jianchen thought to himself as a way to try and explain just what could cause such a phenomenon like this. Slowly opening his eyes, Jianchen began to move his right hand. Opening and closing his fingers, Jianchen suddenly realized that the room was rather hot in temperature, before a flash of red light began to gather around his hands. In a moment, a faint sea of fire could be seen on it. In disbelief, Jianchen looked at the miniature sea of flames in his hands with a thunderstruck expression, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. Despite the flames being so close to Jianchen's hands to the point of contact, he felt no heat at all. It was almost as if the flames were an illusion and not real. Fire! There's a fire, fiery! Suddenly, a frantic shout could be heard from outside the room. Jolting him out of his inner thoughts, Jianchen suddenly realized the room had suddenly burst into flames. In his moment of stupor, the flames gathered in his hand had disappeared. When he was in such a state, he had nearly forgotten just how flammable this room was. Bang! The door to the room was abruptly kicked apart as the simple-clothed-wearing fatty charged straight into the room with a frantic cry. No, no, no! There's a fire! Come on, Jianchen, we have to get out! As if he was flying, the fatty flew toward Jianchen's bed and carried him out of the room. In a moment, the flames from the room began to soar high into the sky, as if devouring the heavens. Put out the fire! Hurry, someone get some water! Several shouts rang through the air, as a dozen simple-clothed villagers came running forth with buckets of water. Tianyu, what happened? Just how in the world did a fire start? Suddenly, the father of the fatty appeared out of nowhere, as he addressed the flames eating away at the house. Wailing, the fatty looked toward his father with a wretched but innocent face. Dad, I don't know either. Everything was perfect. Just how could the house catch on fire? There wasn't even any light sources anywhere. Hearing that, the father's eyes turned toward Jianchen with a leveled stare, but he said nothing. The fatty's eyes swiveled toward Jianchen, as if he had come to a conclusion as well. With a gasp he cried, Dear gods, Jianchen, don't tell me you're suicidal. Jianchen stood up by himself with some difficulty. Although his wounds looked like they were healed on the surface, anyone that looked at him would know that any small movement caused Jianchen a tremendous amount of pain. I am terribly sorry, this was not intentional. Jianchen let out a small smile on his face, indicating that his mood had improved a bit from earlier. Oh my Jianchen, I beg you 1,000 times over, don't be depressed. You're so young, you can't go kill yourself. You absolutely must continue to live. The fatty fretted as he looked at Jianchen, thinking that he had done something foolish in his moment of depression. At the sight of the fatty fretting over him, Jianchen couldn't help but let out a small smile. Don't worry, I won't kill myself. After making sure that Jianchen was not pretending, the father laughed. It seems you've already gotten over it. Quick, put out the fire. Faster with the water, everyone move faster. At this moment, the villagers were still bringing bucket after bucket toward the fire in an effort to combat it. Walking forward to stop the villagers, the middle-aged man spoke. There is no need to be so panicked. Please rest for now. Whether it burns or not, we will have to rebuild it anyways. If you say so, Uncle Xiaomi, then we'll take our time. The villagers immediately stopped their frantic movements and addressed the man with a respectful greeting. Ai, my poor house. It seems that I have to rebuild it once more. The fatty wailed. At this, Jianchen felt extremely embarrassed. In such a careless moment, he had accidentally set the house he was in on fire. This made him feel apologetic. I am truly sorry. When I recover, please allow me to help you rebuild. Jianchen spoke apologetically. The fatty's eyes sparkled on his face as he replied, Okay then. Don't you forget it then. When you get better, the two of us will build a house even bigger than the last one. As soon as he finished speaking, The fatty suddenly looked behind him in surprise. Grandfather. Jianchen, look. My grandfather is back. Turning around slowly, Jianchen could only see a hoe-wielding elder walking from some distance away. He looked rather ordinary, like anyone else around his age. A single piece of straw held his hair together, and even his clothes were of ordinary make. Both of his legs and the clothes around them were covered with dirt, as if he had spent the entire day working the fields, and had just returned home like a farmer would. Grandfather, the person father rescued has finally woken up. Let me introduce you, his name is Jianchen. The fatty cried out in a hurry to greet his grandfather. The elder looked at Jianchen for a moment before turning back to the fatty with a kindly smile. Little fatty, why is your house on fire? The fatty looked at Jianchen as well. Jianchen had wanted to kill himself in his depression, but everything's okay now. He has accepted life. After hearing such a statement, Jianchen had nearly fell to the ground in shock. This fatty's words held nothing back, and were based off of his own judgment. It was as if he was still a child, something that was odd compared to his current age. After he heard the fatty's words, the elder began to laugh as he walked up to Jianchen. With a kindly smile he spoke. Youngster, those who do not die are bound to come across fortune. Take this spirit pill and eat it. It should heal your inner organs to some degree at the very least. Out of nowhere, the elder took out a pill and gave it to Jianchen. Seeing the elder take out another pill, the fatty's father had a shocked look on his face. Haha, Jianchen, this is a class 8 spirit pill, an especially rare treasure. It seems that my father has seen fit to give you too. I thanked the elder, but this item is far too precious for me to accept. Jianchen spoke respectfully. He knew just how rare and precious radiant spirit pills were since they were made by radiant saint masters, by using their own saint force. A single pill like this was far more than what Jianchen could accomplish. The elder laughed. This item has little use for me here. It is coincidental that you were in need of it, so take it and recover as soon as you can. After some hesitation, Jianchen submitted, and took the pill from the elder. Carefully putting it away safely, he knew that this pill was far too expensive for him to lose. Little fatty, go and find a room for Jianchen to rest in. After that, the elder threw down his hoe, and headed to another house not too far away. Looking at the retreating back of the elder with a complicated look, Jianchen didn't know what to think. Jianchen, let's go and find you a new room. The fatty spoke as he walked away. Soon enough, Jianchen found himself in another bed. He needed to rest as little fatty had said, so he sat down on the bed and began to sleep. After a while, Jianchen managed to calm himself down and tried to control the radiant saint force around him to heal. The class 8 spirit pill was far too precious for him to eat just yet. Just as Jianchen began to think, a milky white ball of light began to form around him. Feeling the speed of the radiant saint force gathering, Jianchen couldn't help but smile faintly. Perhaps it was because of the mutation to his soul, but he felt that his control over the radiant saint force had grown stronger and stronger. Even after controlling it to such an extent, he didn't feel strained at all. Chapter 375. Recovery of Jianchen afterward. Jianchen began to heal himself using his stronger control over the radiant saint force. Because his internal wounds were even more severe than his external ones, it took Jianchen an entire day of stubbornly healing himself before he had completely recovered. The following day, Jianchen walked out of the room to take in the morning air. The little fatty had stayed in the next house over as Jianchen's neighbor. At this moment, he had just walked out of his room, as well only to see Jianchen right next to him. With a smile he cried out, "Hey Jianchen, are you fully healed now? I thank your grandfather for giving me the pill. I've fully recovered from my wounds now." Jianchen smiled. "Haha, that's great. You finally gained some free time. Let's go. I'll take you on a tour of the village and introduce you to everyone." As he spoke, the fatty led Jianchen by the arm toward the village without a break in his stride. Not too far away, Jianchen could see the grandfather of the fatty walking away with a hoe over his shoulder. "Grandfather, are you going to the fields again?" Little fatty called out to his grandfather with an enthusiastic greeting. The grandfather laughed as he spoke. That's right, there's still some plants that haven't been planted yet, so I have to hurry. Grandfather, I'm going to take Jianchen around the village. I'll be back later to help you. Haha, go on then, take Jianchen around for a stroll, and get to know everyone. This village hasn't seen many outsiders, so you should be able to make a good impression. The grandfather laughed merrily with a kind expression. Jianchen looked at the grandfather for a moment, before silently following the fatty away. The grandfather smiled as he watched Jianchen walk away. This youngster is quite the strange one. Right by his side, the father of the fatty appeared with a hoe in hand as he spoke. Father, could it be that even you cannot see what this Jianchen is like? This child is no ordinary one. He is no small frog within the pond. The grandfather let out a sigh, before leaving with the hoe still on his shoulder. After listening to his father's evaluation of Jianchen, the middle-aged man had a thunderstruck expression. Looking at Jianchen's back, he said nothing and instead followed his father toward the fields. On the road, the fatty continued to give Jianchen some information about the village, like saying that it was within the Valley of Longevity. There were mountains everywhere with precipitous peaks that were hard to climb. The only way into this valley was a single road that twisted about more than a snake. This village had over 100 families living within it, totaling up to 600 people in all. Since they were cut off from the outside world, they could only rely on themselves to support their families. The entire village relied on Fatty's father to go out and bring them essentials from the world every so often, so they themselves never left. That was also due to the fact that the valley was exceptionally deep and connected to the biggest mountain range in the continent, the Cross Mountains. The valley was also home to thousands of strong magical beasts. The distance from this place to the outside world was well over 1,000 kilometers and was fraught with danger. Even if one had 9 lives, if one wanted to leave, it would be highly unlikely that they would be able to. Little fatty, if your father is able to reach the outside world, then your father must be a truly amazing person. Jianchen commented. Of course, my father is super amazing. Not only does he teach the entire village how to cultivate, but he'll occasionally bring back a super strong magical beast for the village. Because of this, the entire village worships my father. The fatty said proudly. Since your father is so amazing, then your grandfather must be as well, correct? Jianchen asked. That, I don't know, but I don't think my grandfather is all that strong. If he doesn't go fishing, then he's working the fields. I've never seen him bring home any magical beast, but he is the village elder where even my father listens to him. Have you ever seen the outside world? Nope. The fatty shook his head. I've lived my entire life in this village without ever going outside, but I've heard from my dad that the outside world is extremely large and wonderful. One time my father had planned on taking me outside, but my grandfather had stopped him and gave him a scolding. He said that I wasn't suited for the outside world. And so after that, my father never once let me out of the village. Suddenly, the fatty's eyes began to shine as he stared at Jianchen. Jianchen, aren't you from the outside world? How is it, are the people as big and great as my dad says? Come on, tell me. Is the outside world as my dad says? Jianchen nodded his head. Correct, the outside world is extremely vast. Far bigger than you could possibly imagine. However, it is especially cruel out there. One must be strong in order to survive. Little fatty, do you wish to see the outside world? Of course. I spend every day hoping that I can see the outside world, just once to see what it's like. Suddenly, the fatty looked at Jianchen with a serious expression. Jianchen, you can't tell my grandfather or he'll grow extremely angry. Jianchen returned the look. Little fatty, if you truly wish to see the outside world, you'll first have to convince your grandfather. No, I can't. My grandfather's anger is something you definitely don't want to see. Although my grandfather is usually kind, when he gets angry, even my father becomes afraid. The fatty instantly turned nervous as he thought about his grandfather. Fine then, I promise I won't say a word. Seeing how nervous the fatty became, Jianchen couldn't help but worry for him. The fatty let out a sigh in relief. Jianchen, you're a nice guy. If you were my grandfather, that'd be great. That way, I'd be able to see what it's like outside." At this, Jianchun had nearly stumbled to the ground. Afterward, the fatty brought Jianchun around the entire village and introduced him to many different people. Among the villagers, there were plenty of pretty little women that were still quite plain compared the ones Jianchun had seen in the outside world. But when they saw Jianchun's handsome and determined face, many of the women instantly grew as still as a deer as their faces began to turn red. Jianchun's face was a natural weapon to any women under the heavens. This held especially true for all of the valley women. After walking around the entire village, Jianchun finally found an excuse to detach from the fatty and headed for the outskirts of the village by himself. In a short moment, Jianchun had passed by several roads and arrived at a mountain range. Right now, he had to make sure that he fully understood the situation his body was in. He had a feeling that even with his saint weapon broken, it was not the end of the world just yet. Arriving at a small hill, Jianchun sat down with a tranquil look as he began to meditate. Suddenly, a picture of the surrounding kilometer began to appear within his mind, where not even the impossible spots in one's vision were overlooked. By this point, there was nothing that was a secret to Jianchun. Even the insects crawling on the ground 100 meters away could be seen by Jianchun. The azulate sword laws began to form within Jianchun's mind as he figured that this was the work of being omnipresence. Jianchun continued to work at this omnipresence, increasing his range from 1 kilometer to 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers, 5 kilometers, 8 kilometers, 10 kilometers. Jianchun's omnipresence had somehow managed to reach 10 kilometers, but this was the farthest he could go. By this point, Jianchun could see anything within that range without anything escaping his senses. Not even a single blade of grass was left uncomprehended by him. Suddenly, Jianchun lifted up both arms, causing the earth elements in the world to gather near him. Afterward, a large earthen wall began to form by Jianchun's side and encased him inside. Then the dirt began to compress so much that by the end, it had somehow managed to turn into solid stone. Then, the entire area began to soar in temperature as a sea of fire appeared as well, scoring the entire sky. The plants beneath Jianchun's feet began to wither as several trees began to burn. The wind began to pick up in speed and blew sand everywhere, forming a dust storm. Countless of plants were uprooted, and combined with the burning trees, the fire grew extremely large in scale. Right after, the energy within the world began to ripple as a blue-colored light blanketed the entire forest, before finally forming a large pool of water above. With a torrential downpour, the fire within the forest had been extinguished. Following the downpour, the sunlight began to grow darker as the previously daytime light turned to night. No matter where one went within 1 kilometer, there was only a blanket of shadows that made it hard to see even one's hand in front of their faces. But even then, the shadows began to grow smaller in scale from 1 kilometer to 500 meters, shrinking once more to 20 meters before finally transforming into a single black-colored sword that floated right in front of Jianchun. With a point of his finger, the sword moved straight through the air and pierced through hundreds of trees before disappearing into the world. And as soon as the black-colored sword shot through a tree, the tree would instantly begin to wither away. The energy of darkness had a strong rotting nature. Slowly sitting back down, Jianchun's entire heart was in turmoil. After his soul had fused with the sword spirits, he had managed to gain a whole new set of abilities. Now he was fully capable of controlling any of the 6 elements within the world, and could bend them to his will. Then, Jianchun's hand began to rise up as a faint glow of azure and violet sword chi extended from his fingertips. Chapter 376. Control over all living things. Looking at the sword chi extending from his fingers emotionally, Jianchun couldn't hide his joy at all. The sword chi was extremely strong thanks to the sword spirits, and was his strongest attack. Although he had lost his light-wind sword in years and years of bitter cultivation, he still had plenty of fighting strength left. He was not a cripple that could not fight. The faint glows of sword chi continued to shine with both colors standing side by side, as if it were a natural scene. This type of manner was as if the two were mingling with each other peacefully. In a daze, Jianchen stared at the azure and violet sword qi. He couldn't help but think back to when he was fighting the 8 Heaven Saint Masters. Back when he was at the final part of the road, the sword qi had fused in the same manner. With that memory fresh in mind, Jianchen's heart trembled with some lingering fear. The fusion of the two sword qi had been extremely powerful, causing even Jianchen to be afraid. It was strong enough to shatter the saint weapons of the Heaven Saint Masters, as if they were made of being curd. This was something that was impossible to imagine for him. But when he thought about the two sword spirits making a full recovery, he couldn't even possibly begin to visualize just what terrifying level they would reach in power. When Jianchen began to think back to just how powerful the repercussions had been when he used the fused sword qi, Jianchen could only shake his head with a bitter laugh. After the sword qi had fused together, they had formed a formidable power with devastating aftereffects. If it were not for the fact that he had been trapped by the other Heaven Saint Masters, Jianchen would not have dared to try and test it out. Suddenly, Jianchen's heart skipped a beat as he opened his palm, causing a mysterious type of energy to fill the air around him. The leaves on the ground began to lift up, as if being attracted by some type of force, and slowly revolved around Jianchen. Closing his eyes, Jianchen began to harmonize with the world to become one. It was with a sudden realization that he felt his spirit connect with every single living thing around him. This feeling was similar to when he used the spirit sword, allowing him to control every living thing. Suddenly, the countless leaves slowly flowing about Jianchen's body began to shine brightly with an azure and violet glow. With an ear-splitting sound, they all suddenly shot toward a nearby tree with a blinding speed. Without a sound, the tree was instantly pierced straight through as the leaves continued on without faltering for even a moment. As they traveled farther and farther away, they continued to cut a path through any of plants in their way. It was only after 10 kilometers that the leaves finally began to slow down, and in the end, disintegrated in midair without the azure and violet sword qi. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Suddenly, wave after wave of sounds could be heard as all of the leaves still floating around Jianchen transformed into a blinding rays of light and shot outward, spearing through anything in their path. The sword qi infused in the leaves had only disappeared after 10 kilometers, causing the leaves to fall apart into dust. Jianchen opened his eyes slowly and looked around himself with a stunned look. With a sudden thought, one of the trees near him flew out of the ground and floated 10 meters in midair. Extending his hand, Jianchen then clenched his fist tightly. Straight away, the entire tree exploded into wood shavings and fell to the ground. In the next moment, the azure and violet glows of light could be seen once more flying from the wood shavings. Flying upward, the wood shavings began to form a 50-meter-long sword that floated in midair before flying forward. As the sword flew forward, no matter if it was a tree that was tall enough to scratch the heavens, or just a blade of grass, the sword cleaved it in two, and left behind a smooth surface. In a moment, the previously peaceful forest changed dramatically as dozens of large trees toppled down to the ground. Jianchen's eyes glinted with a bright light as he watched this event. His left eye began to emit a violet glow, and his right eye an azure glow. This was a sight that would terrify anyone. With both of Jianchen's eyes burning brightly with the two different colors, his hands both raised into the air. Suddenly, a strange sort of energy began to distort the air like the space itself was being frozen in time. To anyone looking, this would have been an extremely bizarre sight. Crack, crack, crack. Several of the trees floating in midair began to break apart into fist-sized pieces before starting to shine with azure and violet glows. The lights in Jianchen's eyes began to recede as he looked at the sight dumbfounded. Both of his eyes had a look of disbelief to them as he slowly dropped his hands. As soon as his hands fell, the trees that were floating in the air began to lose the same color lights. Then, the tree pieces disintegrated away into ashes and scattered. Jianchen stood still without any extra movements. This newfound change in his body was something that he simply couldn't believe. Right now, he was fully capable of controlling any living thing with the use of his azure and violet sword qi. Right now, the sword qi could be bent to his will, and was practically an ability for him to use at any given moment. In the past, even when Jianchen used the sword qi, it was when he used the spirit sword to fight from long range. The azure and violet sword qi wasn't limited to the light wind sword anymore. He no longer had any restriction other than the distance away from his body. But other than that, he could use any living thing and infuse it with sword qi. This type of power, did the sword spirits bestow it upon me? Jianchen couldn't help but wonder. Ever since the fusion, he could only see the huge changes to his soul and life. Not only was it extremely beneficial, but the power was far beyond anything that he could imagine, especially since he could control living beings themselves. Jianchen continued to walk farther and farther away from the valley. Right now, he solely desired to pit himself against a magical beast in order to gauge his strength. Longevity Valley was immensely deep, and while there were very few magical beasts to be found in this part, each one of them were at the very least a Class 5 magical beast. After walking for 20 kilometers, he had finally come across a decently strong magical beast. This one looked like a beetle-type magical beast, the iron beetle. The moment when the iron beetle saw Jianchen, it immediately let out a roar before charging straight at him. With a sweep of his hand, a single half-meter-long blade of grass flew toward the iron beetle's head with the azure and violet sword qi infused in it. PCH, with a single crack, the blade of grass penetrated straight through the iron beetle's head before flying out of it and disappearing into the forest. Without even a cry, the iron beetle fell to the floor with a thundering crash as its gigantic body slammed down to the ground. Just like that, a powerful Class 5 magical beast had been killed so easily. Jianchen let out a breath as he tried to calm himself down, so that the pleased look in his eyes wouldn't get too far out of hand. Waving his right hand, several blades of grass turned bright with color as they flew toward the iron beetle's body and dug holes straight into its body. Extending his hand, he suddenly clenched tightly, causing a bloody Class 5 monster core to suddenly fly out from the magical beast's body and land in his hand. Continuing forward, it wasn't for another 10 kilometers when 4 crimson streaks of light came flying at Jianchen from all directions. These 4 crimson wolves were all Class 5 magical beasts as well. Each one of them was filled with more wisdom and knowledge than usual. Right afterward, several more blurs could be seen as more wolves surrounded Jianchen. They were smaller in size compared to the first 4 wolves, signifying that they were Class 4 magical beasts. Jianchen looked at the wolves around him calmly. Slowly bringing up his right hand, he stared at a nearby tree. In the next moment, the tree suddenly burst into several splinters with sword qi infused in them. They shot toward the wolves like shooting stars. Without any resistance, all of the Class 4 magical beasts were instantly riddled with holes from the sword qi infused with splinters. Even the Class 5 magical beasts had only been able to put up a slight struggle before sharing the same fate as the other magical beasts, finally crying out with loud whimpers. Within a single moment, a dozen and 4 Class 4 and 5 magical beasts had all been annihilated by Jianchen. This type of glorious battle prowess was something that Jianchen would have never been able to accomplish in the past. Jianchen took another deep breath. He finally had a general idea of what his current strength was at. Although he had lost his light wind sword and his saint force, he had gained a new ability. Not only could he sense the 6 elements in the world, he could even freely use the violet and azure sword qi whenever he wanted. Aside from these things, he also had an even more terrifying ability. The ability to mind control any living thing in this world, as long as he was within the range of his spirit. Even some non-living things would be unable to escape Jianchen's mind control. From a certain standpoint, Jianchen's strength hadn't decreased at all. On the contrary, it had actually increased. At the very least, his newfound control ability was able to make quick work of a group of Class 5 magical beasts. There could be no construction without destruction, and it was only after destruction that construction could take place. After experiencing such a calamitous event, Jianchen had been transformed. From this moment on, he would walk along another path of cultivation. His strength would break away from the ranking of the Tianyuan continent, since he no longer had any saint force to measure. Chapter 377. Executing a Class 6 magical beast after testing it out. Jianchen had a better understanding of his own strength now. With a wave of his hand, a few hundred blades of grass flew up and stabbed into the bellies of the wolves. With a strong thought, he managed to pull out all of their monster cores. After taking off a portion of his clothes, he began to wrap up the cores and store them behind him. After collecting the monster cores, Jianchen decided to leave the forest. Turning around to face the way back to Longevity Valley, he knew he needed to calm down for a bit and digest the changes to his body. These bizarre changes were far too sudden for him, and the new power he had received made him feel like he was stuck in a dream. He needed to rest so he could adapt to his situation. Ew! Suddenly, the howl of a wolf could be heard, shaking the entire forest with its cry. Jianchen's body suddenly stopped as a look of concentration overtook his face. Slowly turning around, he spread out his senses for a kilometer, only to see a 10-meter-long, 3-meter-tall blood-red wolf flying in his direction at breakneck speeds. Jianchen didn't run, nor did he have any plans on running away, although he was still as strong as ever. In the end, he still didn't have any Saint Force anymore. His speed would only be a little faster than a normal person. He couldn't even use the illusionary flash or the Heaven's Stolen Fortune, since both battle skills required the use of Saint Force. The blood-red wolf quickly came to a stop in front of Jianchen's position 50 meters away. With eyes that were bigger than the fist of an adult human, they glared at Jianchen menacingly. Concentrating, Jianchen immediately began to gather all of the earth elements in the world around him to form a 5-meter-tall dirt wall. Continuing to gather, the dirt wall began to compress before finally forming a wall of hard rock. At the same time, Jianchen held up a finger, causing a single tree nearby to burst out of the ground and float beside Jianchen, while twinkling with the azure and violet sword chi. With Jianchen's body hidden behind the stone wall, the wolf was unable to see what Jianchen was doing. However, Jianchen could fight against the wolf with his omnipresence-like ability. From its gathered knowledge and wisdom, the wolf had already guessed that Jianchen was not going to be an easy opponent to fight due to his actions. With a snarl, a large amount of energy began to gather in the wolf's mouth. Then, with a puffing motion, the ball of energy flew toward the wall with a whistling sound. At the same time, Jianchen had already fashioned the tree to become a long spear that flew forward to stab into the ball of energy from the wolf. Following a large bang, the ball of energy suddenly exploded, causing the energy to wash over the area. The wooden weapons that Jianchen was using were unable to withstand the energy and disintegrated into ashes. The man and beast had only been testing each other at that moment, but the destructive aftermath had completely reshaped the landscape around them. Both of Jianchen's eyes shined bright with an azure and violet glow. The left eye flashed with violet and the right azure. Suddenly, countless blades of grass flew up around the wolf and instantly transformed into sharp sword-like shapes before flying into the wolf's body. Caught off guard, the blood-red wolf's body was suddenly riddled with holes, but it did nothing to hinder its strength or speed as expected from a Class 6 magical beast. The azure and violet sword chi was unable to pierce through the entire body, as it had with the iron beetle. This time, it was only able to penetrate 3 inches in before stopping. Despite this, it was still a decent amount of damage inflicted. The pain it felt all over its body caused the wolf to howl in pain before energy began to leak out from its body, forcing all of the embedded blades of grass away from its wounds. Ayo! Even after all of the damage, the wolf had no intentions on retreating. On the contrary, it had instead grown even more berserk and transformed into a bloody red streak of light as it charged toward Jianchen. Even more blades of grass flew up from the ground and took on the shape of a sword. With the azure and violet sword chi infused, they flew out to stop the blood wolf once more. But because of the large amount of energy rippling out from the blood-red wolf's body, all of the blades of grass began to slow down as they approached. Even the sword chi in the grass began to weaken as well. Thanks to the shroud of energy protecting the wolf's body, the sword chi grew dimmer and dimmer. At the same time, the azure and violet glow in Jianchen's eyes began to grow stronger and stronger in intensity. All of the trees surrounding him exploded and caused countless of splinters to fly up into the air, protecting his entire body. With a single thought, Jianshan instantly transformed the wood splinters to form a draconic shape before flying to hit the wolf. The very moment when the sword chi-infused wooden dragon struck against the wolf's shroud of energy, the wolf's forward momentum began to slow down noticeably. The energy protecting its body was pushed farther and farther back before the wooden dragon was finally able to strike its head, dealing a tremendous blow instantly. Ew! The wolf let out another howl in pain as a large ball of energy shot out from his mouth. At the same time, the wooden dragon that had slammed into the wolf was scattered by the ball, and the pieces dispersed into the air. Jianshan let out a sneer as he muttered, "You are truly strong. Let's see if you can handle my strongest attack then." Jianshan's finger formed a sword, allowing the special energy from the sword spirits to extend out a meter from his fingertips. This was a blade made of pure origin energy from the sword spirits, something stronger than the wooden dragon from before in terms of sword chi. In that moment, the origin energy extended out to fly at the wolf. Knowing just how strong the azure and violet sword chi was, the wolf instantly lashed out with his claws to bat away the origin energy from the sword spirits. But the very moment the two made contact, its claws were split in two. In that instant, the wolf's eyes revealed a panicked air. Unfortunately, the origin energy was already far too close to the wolf, so that it wouldn't be able to dodge. In the end, the attack stabbed into the wolf's head. A heaven-shaking howl could be heard, as even its soul had been annihilated by the sword spirits. With a bang, the wolf's carcass fell to the ground. Seeing the dead wolf on the ground, Jianshan let out a sigh in relief. This one battle had made him realize just how far his strength had improved. With his ability to use his mind to control every living thing with his sword chi, he was able to easily kill a Class 5 magical beast. But a Class 6 magical beast was a little harder to kill. If he wanted to kill one, he had to use the origin energy of the sword spirits. In the end, it could be said that Jianshan had already reached the level of a Heaven Saint Master in terms of battle strength. Collecting the Class 6 monster core from within the wolf's body, Jianshan immediately began to drag the body back toward Longevity Valley. The body of a Class 6 magical beast was far too precious to waste here. If he could present it to the village in the valley to dine on such a high-class meat, then it would prove very beneficial for everyone. Suddenly, Jianshan felt something in the air. Looking up into the sky, he could only see a muddy middle-aged man fly over, before landing next to Jianshan. This person was the father of Fatty, and was also the very same person who had rescued Jianshan. With a stunned look, the middle-aged man looked at the carcass of the blood wolf behind Jianshan. "Jianshan, did you kill this blood wolf king?" Revealing a small smile, Jianshan felt a sense of satisfaction from this achievement. "Yes, I killed it." The father clapped his hands in applause. Not bad at all. The Bloodwolf King is a Class 6 magical beast of the 3rd cycle. I didn't think that you would be able to kill one. Just what method did you use to kill it? Now that you've lost your saint weapon, you shouldn't have any energy left in your body. There was a good deal of confusion on the man's face. I used the power of my mind. Jianshan didn't bother to hide the truth at all since it wasn't necessary. Using his right hand to cut the air slightly, a handful of grass suddenly jumped upward before forming a sharp sword. With the azure and violet sword chi infused in it, they shot toward the body of the Bloodwolf King. Despite it being dead, its body was once more riddled with holes. The fatty's dad could only stare in utter shock before speaking absent-mindedly. What a mysterious power. This power is your mind. Unfathomable. Just utterly unfathomable. Jianshan smiled, but decided to not dwell on the subject anymore. "Uncle, are you heading out to the outside world?" He shook his head. "My father told me to come here. He was afraid that you would be in danger, and told me to look around. However, it seems that my father's worries were unfounded. Despite the loss of your saint weapon, you didn't lose your strength. Let's go back, Jianshan. It's almost time for the noon meal." With that, the man flew into the air before quickly disappearing from sight. Seeing the man disappear, Jianshan showed an envious expression. The ability to fly through the sky had always been one of his goals. Suddenly, the fatty's father came back. Seeing how Jianchen was still on the ground, he asked with concern, "Jianchen, are you not able to fly?" Shaking his head, Jianchen replied, "I haven't yet grasped the way to do so. Flying is a difficult challenge for me. It should be no problem for me to look into it when we return to the village, however, at this moment." "Ah, is that so? Then allow me to take you back. The noon meal shouldn't take too long to finish, so by the time we return, it should almost be ready." With that, the man waved his hand, enveloping Jianchen within his energy, before bringing both him and the carcass of the Blood Wolf King up into the air and through the valley. Chapter 378. Celestial Decay. Seeing how they were flying through the air, Jianchen couldn't help but feel excited. The power of flight was something he would soon be able to achieve. Since he was able to control the elements in the world with his mind, flying would not be a problem for him. He just hadn't discovered the trick yet. Given some time and experimentation, then he would be able to attain flight, just like the Heaven Saint Masters. Slowly closing his eyes, Jianchen began to feel for the wind elements surrounding him, and began to figure out the trick to flying, and to increase the speed. Flying seemed simple, but there were many significant details to be learned first. It required constant practice in order to excel at it. Otherwise, if a beginner student were to try to fly 100 meters in the air, and was hit by a sudden gust of wind, he would be unable to control his flight. The speed they were flying at was extremely fast. It didn't take long for Jianchen and the man to return to the valley. It was noon by now and smoke could be seen spiraling up from the village. At least 5 men could be seen scurrying around the village in preparation. The middle-aged man didn't bother to hide their entrance and pulled both Jianchen and the carcass of the Blood Wolf King to the center of the village before slowing down. "Hey, Xiaomi has returned. Xiaomi has brought back another large magical beast. Haha. It seems that the village won't be able to finish this much meat. With such a large wolf, who knows just how long it'll take. AI. Xiaomi always brings back such a fearsome beast for the village. He has always done the greatest contributions for the sake of our village." As everyone began to show up, they all looked toward Fatty's father with looks of undisguised worship and admiration. There was no shock at all from seeing the two fly back. It was almost as if it was a regular sight. The father let out a laughing smile before replying back to everyone enthusiastically. There was no hint of arrogance normally seen in a Heaven Saint Master, and just kindness instead. "Xiaomi, you are too amazing. It doesn't take much thought to know that this wolf was extremely strong, but you killed it easily." One of the men laughed. The man shook his head. "Everyone misunderstands. This magical beast wasn't Dash." As the middle-aged man spoke, Jianchen cut in abruptly. "Uncle, let's hurry up and divide up the Blood Wolf King. The fresher it is, the better it will taste." Fatty's father laughed. Fine. De Zhuang, go and find some of the more able-bodied men to skin the carcass and divide up the meat." "You got it." The man responded enthusiastically before gathering up the men. "Whoa, Dad, you brought back another big magical beast." A cordial voice could be heard from behind as a muddy fatty could be seen walking with a hoe in hand. He must have returned from tilling the fields with his grandfather. Without any further explanation, the father took Jianchen back to eat a meal after greeting everyone. The meal had been cooked by Fatty's mother. She looked no older than 30 years old, and was spectacular in appearance. There was the grand air of a noble about her, and despite the common clothing she was wearing, it did nothing to hide her mannerisms. It didn't take more than a single look to figure out that she wasn't raised from the village. Sitting at the table with the family of 4, Jianchen began to eat. The meal was rather simple, and consisted of vegetables they grew themselves. The grandfather of Fatty gave a deep look to Jianchen before smiling. "Youngster, come to the cornfields with me for a while later. There's a plot of land that requires cultivating." "Grandfather, Jianchen only just healed. Why would you make him do manual labor? Wait for Dad and I to finish planting the cabbages. We'll help you then." There was a complaint to be heard from Fatty, showing that he was clearly dissatisfied from his grandfather asking Jianchen to do some farming. Upon hearing the grandfather's request for him to help till the fields, Jianchen was stunned for a moment. Then a relieved look took over his face. Fine. But I've never farmed before. So if there is anything I don't understand, I hope that senior will give me pointers. Jianchen knew that the grandfather was a hidden expert that was living in seclusion for some unknown reason. Jianchen wouldn't squander a chance to talk to the grandfather for any reason. No need to call me senior, my family name is Xiao. As the village elder, you may call me Elder Xiao or Uncle Xiao. The grandfather spoke with a kind voice. After the meal, Jianchen followed Elder Xiao out toward the cornfields with a hoe on the top of his shoulder. When Jianchen looked at the hoe on his shoulder, he couldn't help but force out a smile. Could it be that with your noble status, you feel that this hoe is degrading your status? The grandfather's face had already lost the kindly expression he had back in the village. Right now, he was expressionless. It would appear that the kindly expression would only appear within the village. Elder Xiao, you misunderstand. That was not my thought at all. This is my very first time farming with a hoe before, so it is a new sensation. Jianchen tried to explain. And then that's fine. No matter how strong you are or how high your status is, you must never throw away your conscience. A man's conscience is extremely important. One must be kind and benevolent in order to attain the highest level of mastery. Take heed to this. Even if you are a genius without equal and have only success after success, in the end, your achievements will amount to nothing. The elder spoke. This junior will remember these words. Jianchen spoke modestly. Elder Xiao continued to walk toward the field with the hoe in hand. I know that your heart doesn't truly understand the meaning of my words. But you must know, all those within the continent who have reached the Saint Ruler realm have always decided to shun the world. It is very rare that they roam the outside world. Jianchen narrowed his eyes as he thought about the words. This junior has always thought that those who have reached such a level have practically detached themselves from the secular world and all of the worldly enticements. That is why they do not appear in the outside world often. But hearing Elder Xiao's words, is that the true reason? Correct, the situation isn't as you thought. For all those who have reached the Saint Ruler realm, they have already comprehended the existence of the profound mysteries of the world. At the same time of gaining such a strength, they also feel the restrictions of the world. The restrictions of the world? Jianchen was extremely curious now. This was the very first time he had heard of such a matter relating to a Saint Ruler. Correct, the restrictions of the world. After reaching the realm of the Saint Ruler, they will receive the punishment of the celestial decay. The celestial decay is a terrifying matter that has never been broken free from. It's a rule that is specifically directed toward those Saint Rulers who have violated any of the laws. Elder Xiao's face grew somber as he talked, an indicator of just how terrifying the celestial decay was. Elder Xiao, just what is this celestial decay? Is it truly that terrifying? Jianchen was curious. He had never heard of such a thing before, so it was hard to not be curious. The celestial decay is a law of the world that transcends time itself. It is able to eliminate or discipline those at the Saint Ruler level or higher. There are 5 different stages to the celestial decay. The hair becomes as dry as hay, the body withers away, the blood within the body evaporates, the inner organs begin to burn, and finally the soul itself dies out. By this point, the body and soul are truly extinguished. Within the Tianyuan continent, no matter how strong of an ability one has, if they commit a great sin, they will not be able to escape the punishment of the celestial decay. Thus, the celestial decay is a rule that regulates even Saint Rulers to prevent them from committing any sins. Then what is considered to be committing a great sin? Jianchen asked. At that moment, the 2 men had reached the fields. Swinging his hoe down to till the earth, Elder Xiao began to speak. The exact details are unknown, but after many years, those who have violated the rules of the world spoke of their experiences. From this, we gathered that a Saint Ruler who slaughters countless innocents, or one who commits an act of injuring the heavens, will undoubtedly receive the punishment of the celestial decay. Other than that, we are still not sure what else violates the rules. The celestial decay is a law of the world that regulates Saint Rulers and higher from committing any sins. but it has never appeared within a saint ruler that has secluded himself from the world. The reason why is because of one thing: conscience. Conscience? Jianshan asked. Correct, it is conscience. The world of mortals is a large vat. If one is pure and honest, then they will dye the human world with color. To lose your conscience is to be weak-willed and give in to the temptations of money and power. If a saint ruler wishes to progress in improvement, they must continue to try and comprehend the profound mysteries of the world. One's attitude toward the profound mysteries of the world must be calm and be able to withstand any of the worldly temptations. Once the soul is as close to the world as possible, that is when the comprehension of the profound mysteries of the world come even faster. If one is swayed by the worldly temptations, then they would be stuck in a game like Go. No matter where you go, and no matter how much you try to harmonize with the world, it will be impossible to comprehend the profound mysteries of the world. If one cannot regain their conscience, then there can be no progress. Elder Xiao dug his hoe into the ground again and again as he spoke to Jianshan. Hearing this, Jianshan had no words to say. He continued to think about the words Elder Xiao had said. His words had brought about a great revelation for Jianshan. Truly, listening to the words of a wise man was superior than to studying books for 10 years. A saint ruler's way of cultivation was not like the regular way of cultivating saint force to improve themselves. They walked a different path, by trying to comprehend the profound mysteries of the world. Youngster, I can tell that you are not a fish meant for the pond. You will have a grand future. Despite the loss of your saint weapon, it has done nothing to impact your future growth. I only wish for you to grab hold of your conscience, and to not be lost in the mortal world. Break away from the world and cultivate to the very peak. Elder Xiao stared at Jianshan with a heavy gaze. Chapter 379. Flying through the air. Elder Xiao, thank you for your guidance. This junior will definitely remember these words. Jianshan spoke with an apprehensive feeling in his heart. Separating from the mortal world was easier said than done. He was barely 20 years old with many things left to do, such as revenge. He had not yet felt enough of the warmth from life with his family, so there was no way for him to break away from the mortal world just yet, unlike the elders who had already done so. To a 20-year-old youth like Jianshan, breaking away from the mortal world was impossible. And as long as you remember my words, I know you cannot hope to achieve such a step right now, but you must take heed to never lose your conscience. Do not be deceived by hatred, greed, or power. Elder Xiao continued to speak while brandishing the hoe at the ground. This junior understands. Jianshan was like a modest student who was listening intently to his teacher. As the elder tilled the ground, he suddenly stopped to turn back to Jianshan. Youngster, would it be possible for you to show me your current strength to satisfy my curiosity? I already know of your battle with the Bloodwolf King, but your ability is something that I have never seen before in my entire life. Jianshan couldn't help but feel shocked. He hadn't thought that his every single move and action had been monitored by Elder Xiao. But then, thinking back to just how strong Elder Xiao was, Jianshan felt relieved. This junior has only just received this power, so I do not fully understand it just yet. If Elder Xiao has any pointers to give, then please. With that, Jianshan's eyes began to flash brightly. With a single thought, the ground beneath them began to float up into the air from the power of some mysterious force. Then, an azure and violet glow began to appear before flying straight toward Elder Xiao without any hesitation. But then, before the clods of mud could even get within a meter of Elder Xiao, they suddenly stopped midair. Elder Xiao's eyes contained surprise as he muttered, "This is truly a queer ability. I can only sense an azure and purple ray of light, with a strong amount of power within the mud. This power is something I've never seen or heard before. Just what is this?" The elder hadn't made a single move, but he had somehow managed to bring the floating dirt back down to the ground, without any of the azure or violet light left in it. Jianshan was overwhelmed with shock. Elder Xiao's strength had been at such a level that Jianshan couldn't even begin to comprehend it. With a single action, Jianshan had been left dumbstruck. Jianshan's eyes began to flash with a bizarre azure color in one eye, and a bizarre violet color in the other. Some of the weeds and dirt on the ground began to rise up once more and transform into a single streak that wrapped around the elder with the two glows. The elder smiled faintly. "Youngster, this ability of yours is quite extraordinary." Although the saint rulers who were able to comprehend the profound mysteries of the world can control items with their thoughts, they did not have this azure and violet color to it. This azure and violet glow, however, can constitute as a powerful threat to only heaven saint masters. If you tried it against someone like me, then it would not be enough. Elder Xiao spoke as the attack around him disappeared, and dirt fell back to the ground. Jianchen was stunned, but he wasn't giving up just yet. With a flash of azure and violet in his eyes, sword chi began to gather in his right hand before forming a meter-long sword. This was the origin energy of the sword spirits. With a flash of violet, Jianchen's sword chi struck out at Elder Xiao. Elder Xiao seemed to have stopped right in front of the attack. Looking at the origin energy radiating from the sword chi, he began to mutter, "What a strong amount of sword intent, this aura. It seems like..." In the next moment, the elder became engrossed in his own thoughts. Just as the origin energy coming from Jianchen's sword chi got within a meter of Elder Xiao, an unknown energy suddenly prevented it from moving forward. This energy was so strong, even the origin energy of the sword chi had no chance. Losing color in his face, Jianchen hadn't thought that the elder's strength would be that strong. Even with the origin energy, he had still been unable to get close to the elder. It was like he was an infant compared to Elder Xiao. Even as he stood there, Jianchen was unable to do a single iota of damage. When Jianchen had used his mind to feel around the elder's body, he immediately sensed that the elder was like a piece of the world itself. The origin energy of the sword spirits had been blocked by this worldly energy. Against such a boundless source of energy, Jianchen felt like a tiny boat in a giant ocean. With a deep breath, he began to absorb the origin energy from the sword spirits back into his body. What surprised Jianchen the most was that Elder Xiao's strength had already reached a level he could only dream to reach. Elder Xiao stared at Jianchen's right hand with an unnaturally serious expression before asking, "Youngster, would you be able to tell me, what was that energy in your hand? Where did it come from?" "I call it the azure and violet sword chi, a type of origin energy." Jianchen spoke without revealing much. "Azure and violet sword chi, origin energy, so that person was you after all." Elder Xiao muttered to himself. "What was that, Elder Xiao?" Jianchen asked in confusion. "It's nothing. Youngster, are you able to use that energy at will?" Elder Xiao stared at Jianchen with rapt attention. Jianchen nodded his head. "As of right now, I can use it freely." "Elder Xiao, is something wrong?" "It's nothing. I only feel that this energy is not at its peak state yet." The elder replied. "The origin energy is very weak, so it hasn't reached an optimal state yet." Jianchen replied with a half-truth. "So that's it." The elder suddenly came to a realization. "Youngster, right now you are primarily focused on using your thoughts to attack. In regards to your cultivation path, you will have to continuously practice with your mind. Right now you can easily control tiny objects without a problem. But if you wish to push a giant mountain with just your mind alone, this will not be an accomplishable task. Aside from strengthening your thoughts, you must also comprehend the profound mysteries of the world. Although your strange origin energy is extremely strong, it is still an energy of the world. The profound mysteries of the world are the way of the king, since they are capable of allowing you to control the energy of the world." I thank Elder Xiao for his guidance. This junior will do as senior says. For the rest of the afternoon, Jianchen and the elder both continued to till the cornfields. After learning many things in regards to the profound mysteries of the world from Elder Xiao, Jianchen had begun to ask even more questions. Elder Xiao did his best to answer any questions he had, allowing Jianchen to benefit greatly from his insight and added to his current understanding. On the second day, Elder Xiao didn't call Jianchen to the fields. Jianchen still had his own things he needed to do, so he took the initiative to tell Fatty that he would be heading out by himself. Looking at a patch of grass, Jianchen started to feel for the world energy. As the energy began to fly around his body, Jianchen felt a slight breeze. Jianchen hadn't made any movements and stood as still as a statue. The fierce wind began to pick up, and his clothes began to flap from the gusts of wind. 2 hours later, the winds around Jianchen's body had grown even stronger. Finally, his entire body began to slowly lift into the air by increments of 3 inches without stopping. Like earlier, Jianchen kept his eyes shut as he continued to feel for the wind element around his entire body. His spirit was completely immersed in the thought of making him fly. To be able to fly through the air was an ability that Jianchen had coveted. And today was the day he would finally grab hold of it. His heart was already incapable of describing the joy he was feeling at this current moment. Bang! Suddenly, Jianchen's head struck against the tree in front of him. Straight away, his entire body lost balance and began to fall from the air. Opening his eyes after the ordeal, he climbed up from the ground. It was a good thing his body was different than a regular person's body. Otherwise, he would have broken several bones without the usage of Saint Force to protect his body. It seems that the power of flight isn't something to play around with. I must cultivate even more. Jianchen sighed. Afterward, Jianchen relentlessly practiced the power of flight. He continued to float 10 meters above the ground for 6 hours, before he finally managed to piece together his experiences and go for an even higher height. Flying straight up for another 100 meters without stopping, he could only see wisps of cyan light flow around him. This was the wind element. At this moment, a villager suddenly spotted Jianchen floating 100 meters up in the air. With his mouth dropped wide open, he began to point at Jianchen with a quivering lip. He's. But he was completely unable to finish his sentence in his shock. Elder Wang, what are you stammering around for? Did you forget how to talk? The villager to his side laughed at him, before looking in the direction the villager was pointing. Straight away, he too gasped in shock as he cried, "Good gods, isn't that the youth Xiaomi brought back? How is he able to fly like Xiaomi? Could he be a heaven saint master as well?" The sight of Jianchen 100 meters up into the air was an extremely eye-catching sight. Such an event didn't take long for everyone to witness. Each villager could only look on in utter disbelief. Oh my god, Jianchen could fly? Is he a heaven saint master? God, this is unbelievable. Even the little fatty who was working the fields had noticed Jianchen and instantly cried out in shock. All of a sudden, a strong gust of wind blew across the concentrating figure of Jianchen, forcing his body to shake back and forth. Unable to keep control, Jianchen began to plummet down to the ground. With a change in expression, Jianchen began to collect his thoughts once more before drawing the wind elements close to him. At the same time, a cyan-colored figure could be seen flying straight for Jianchen a good distance away. It was little fatty's father, Xiaomi, who had seen the predicament Jianchen was in and came by quickly to help. Chapter 380. Leaving Longevity Valley, Jianchen's figure continued to free fall down toward the ground. Now that he had lost his Saint Force, a fall 100 meters up in the air would inflict fatal wounds if it didn't kill him outright. Unafraid of the threat of death, Jianchen began to use his mind to control the wind elements in the world once more. In an experiment to regain control, he was finally able to break his fall, just as he reached 50 meters above ground, and thus avoiding danger. Letting out a deep breath as he shook off any lingering fear, he began to think. The power of flight seemed almost infinite, but it was not something to be played around with. If one's control wasn't flawless, then they would be risking their life. Xiaomi flew toward Jianchen before smiling at him. "Youngster, are you fine?" "Yes, I'm fine." Jianchen spoke with a slight amount of panic still in his heart. Xiaomi began to laugh. "Youngster, if you're not that proficient with the ability to fly, then it would be best to not fly so high. In the case that you begin to fall from 100 meters, or even 1,000 meters, even a heaven saint master would not be able to escape with light injuries." Xiaomi began to impart his experiences with Jianchen before explaining several tricks to Jianchen. Then he left to go back to the fields. After experiencing such an event, Jianchen didn't dare fly too high, and instead remained only 10 meters above the ground. For the next 3 days, Jianshan spent the majority of his time practicing his ability to fly. It was fortunate that his ability to perceive was strong. It would normally take a person a month or two to be able to grasp the concept of being able to fly. In just a measly 3 days, he completely understood how to fly. Right now, Jianshan's ability to fly was as strong as his ability to walk on solid ground. He had absolutely no difficulties at all. And if he were to be blown by a fierce gale 1,000 meters up in the air, he would feel nothing. He was as steady as a house without an iota of balance lost to the wind, or even a risk of him plummeting to the ground. Even Xiaomi could only exclaim in astonishment at the sight of Jianshan mastering the ability to fly in 3 days. Applauding, he remarked that when he became a Heaven Saint Master, he had squandered 2 months on learning to fly. Today, Jianshan was eating a meal with the rest of the family. Although Xiaomi and Elder Xiao no longer needed to eat, they had become used eating 3 meals a day, and continued to live like regular people. At the table, Jianshan looked at the family and spoke. "Little Fatty, Aunt Xiao, Uncle Xiaomi, Elder Xiao, I plan to leave Longevity Valley for a few days and bring back several of my things." Upon hearing that Jianshan was planning to head out to the outside world, an indescribable sheen could be seen in Fatty's eyes. After looking at his grandfather, the sheen disappeared. With an envious look he spoke, "Jianshan, come back soon. You promised to help me build a new house, don't forget." Laughing, Jianshan said, "Don't worry, little Fatty. I've already promised you that I will. Wait for me to bring back my things. I'll definitely help you build a new house." Jianshan, Longevity Valley has at least 1,000 kilometers to travel to get to the outside world. Furthermore, the road is filled with dangerous magical beasts. You'd best be careful. The father, Xiaomi, said with concern. Taking a bite out of the steamed bun in his hands, he spoke with a slightly muffled voice. "Don't worry, Uncle Xiaomi. I'll definitely be careful." The grandfather hadn't spoken a word, and continued to eat his morning meal in silence. After the meal and a goodbye, Jianshan flew into the air, and took off in the direction indicated by Xiaomi. It was the way to leave the valley. Jianshan was flying 500 meters above the ground, only to feel the wind blow past his ears and under his legs. Right now, he was feeling a feeling he had never felt before, but he knew it made him happy. Flying through the air and running on the ground were 2 separate matters. Although he wasn't as fast as when he used the Heaven's Stolen Fortune and Illusionary Flash, he still traveled at a decent pace. His speed with the wind elements aiding him was slower than the 3rd elder of the Sher family, but he was barely expending any effort to move. With his strong mind, he could control a small amount of the wind to help him fly through the air without consuming much energy. This was the very first time that Jianshan was flying through the air with his own power, so there was a feeling of fresh wonder. On the way, he continued to look all around him while appreciating the view. At that moment, a black cloud suddenly flew toward Jianshan a small distance away. When Jianshan saw the black cloud headed toward him, his eyes took on a sharp glare, as he tried to see just what was coming at him. As it turns out, the black cloud was actually several hundred flying magical beasts. "So I came across a flock of blackwing birds." Jianshan had read about the blackwing birds within the library at Kargath Academy. These birds lived together in the mountains and had large bodies. A mature blackwing bird was the size of an adult human, at the very least with a wingspan of 10 meters. These blackwing birds weren't Class 5 magical beasts. They were generally Class 3 or Class 4 at the most. Without decreasing his speed, Jianshan flew toward the flock of blackwing birds. Just as he got within 10 kilometers, several trees from under the flock suddenly burst upward. In an explosion of splinters, the trees flew toward the flock like azure and violet shooting stars. Caught off guard, the blackwing birds were struck through their bodies by the trees and began to fall to the ground. In a span of a few moments, the hundreds of birds were all unable to resist with multiple wounds over their bodies, rendering them incapable of flight. Now that Jianshan's strength was equivalent to that of a Heaven Saint Master, a Class 4 magical beast like the blackwing birds were no match. With Jianshan's ability to control any living thing with just his mind, He could fight against his enemy, using the tactics of the majority against the minority. On the way, Jian Chun had come across 3 other disturbances with magical beasts. However, these magical beasts weren't Class 4, and were Class 5 magical beasts. They all had an innate wisdom and instinct that warned them to not attack any person that could fly. For hours later, Jian Chun had traveled 2,000 kilometers before arriving at a mountain range. Then, after another 100 kilometers, he finally arrived at the battleground, where he fought the 8 Heaven Saint Masters. Without any further hesitation, he quickly flew forward another 100 kilometers to the place where he had hidden the white tiger cub. It didn't take long for Jian Chun to arrive there. Slowly descending to the ground, he came to the tree where he had hidden the tiger cub. The moment he saw that the cover was gone and the tree barren, he realized the tiger cub was nowhere to be seen. This was not a surprise for Jian Chun. He had spotted the traces earlier and tried to track where the tiger cub had gone. After some time, he wasn't able to find anything. Jian Chun began to grow solemn by this point, but he was not frantic just yet. Although the tiger cub was lost, he still had a method of finding the tiger cub. Immediately rising up from the ground, he flew toward Mingyang City. An hour later, he arrived in the skies above, and without any form of concealment, flew into the city in front of everyone's eyes. By now, Mingyang City had already returned to its normal state. The frenzied mood they had been in while looking for the tiger cub had long since passed, and even the portraits of Jian Chun's face had been taken down. After the second day of Jian Chun's departure, all news relating to the event had disappeared. But when Jian Chun flew into the sky, he was instantly spotted by the people down below. Each one raised their heads to the sky and dropped their mouths in shock. Quickly, news began to circulate around the city, and thus everyone became aware that a Heaven Saint Master had arrived in their city. The city lord's mansion was the very first to grab hold of this information, and immediately dispatched some soldiers to greet him. In this era where saint rulers secluded themselves from the world, Heaven Saint Masters were widely regarded as the top of the pyramid on the continent. For a Heaven Saint Master to come to Mingyang City, that was no small event. Within the Huangpu clan, the affair that had happened some time ago had no major impact on their clan. The entire compound was calm once more, and several troops patrolled around the compound as a way to guarantee their safety. Just as a squadron was walking past an abandoned house, someone suddenly cried out, "Captain, look up at the skies!" At that, the soldiers lifted their heads to the sky one by one, and when they looked, they were instantly stunned and their eyes grew as wide as dinner plates. A simple clothed person was slowly descending from the sky, just 3 meters away from the squadron. Heaven Saint Master. The captain had a look of utter shock as he stared at the young face of Jian Chun, unable to believe his eyes. For a youth this young to reach the realm of a Heaven Saint Master, it was almost completely unheard of. Respectful sir, I am the captain of Unit 3 of the Huangpu clan. How may I serve you? The captain tried to quash the surprise in his voice, but had stuttered as he spoke to him. Jian Chun cast a glance at the guard briefly before waving his hand. This place doesn't concern you. Go do whatever you were doing. With that tone, it was almost as if Jian Chun was the master of the Huangpu clan. The captain didn't make any objections, and only respectfully saluted him in response, before bringing his guards away from the area. Chapter 381. The disappearance of the little white tiger. After the guards left, Jian Chun had a faint smile on his face. Bringing up his right hand for a moment, a space ring suddenly flew out the window, before landing on his hand. This space ring was the ring that was holding both the seal of Treasure Mountain and the Duanyin sword. With the ring in his hand, Jian Chun looked into the space ring only to find both the seal of Treasure Mountain and the Duanyin sword still stored inside. They had not been taken just yet. Jian Chun could barely hide his joy at this. He knew that the third elder of the Shi family had a method of finding their clan's ruler armament, but the space ring had managed to avoid detection within the Huangpu clan for days. Something like this was a joyous occasion to celebrate. On the way here, Jian Chun was worried that the hidden space ring would have been discovered, but now that he was here, those worries were completely superfluous. Letting out a sigh in relief, a happy smile appeared on Jian Chen's face. He slowly closed his eyes, and in 2 breaths' time, the well within the Huangpu clan compound exploded as a purple and gold box flew through the air. Then, as if attracted by a mysterious power, it flew straight to Jian Chen's hand. Opening up the box, Jian Chen could see the silver space ring tucked away inside. With the other space ring still in his hand, he took that other space ring and threw it into the second one along with the box and left. Not too long after Jian Chen left, a group of nervous people quickly scrambled over to where Jian Chen was. Among the crowd was the master of the Huangpu clan. But Jian Chen had already left the area. Even after searching for a moment, the master of the clan could do nothing else but give up. Flying through the air, Jian Chen quickly made his way out of Mingyang City. On the way, countless people looked up at the sky with expressions of amazement and wonder. But Jian Chen didn't stay around long enough to see. His first priority was to find the whereabouts of the white tiger, and to ensure that it wasn't in any danger. In midair, Jian Chen took out the white patches of fur given to him by Rum Guinness. This patch of fur had a special way of finding where Rum Guinness was as well as where the white tiger was. After following the directions Rum Guinness had told him with the white tiger cub's fur, it began to straighten up before curving at the edges, as if pointing Jian Chen in a specific direction like a compass. Jian Chen looked in the direction where the fur was pointing only to discover it was where he had just come from. Did the white tiger cub run off to the mountain range? Jian Chen thought. The mountain range in question was connected to Cross Mountains and contained one of the kings, which was the white tiger cub's enemy. If the white tiger cub were to fall into the king's paws, then it would be over for the cub. Crap! I hope the cub hasn't been discovered by the king of Cross Mountains. With a serious expression and no hesitation at all, he flew off in the direction the fur pointed. 4 hours later, Jian Chen had deviated from the path back to Longevity Valley, and was instead headed toward Cross Mountains a good distance away. As he flew closer and closer to Cross Mountains, Jian Chen's face began to grow more and more unsightly. He could practically confirm that the white tiger cub was most likely in Cross Mountains. Slowing down, Jian Chen floated in midair as he started to think. If the white tiger cub was found by the king of Cross Mountains, he was doing nothing but charging toward his death. Suddenly, Elder Xiu's image appeared in Jian Chen's mind, almost as if he was giving Jian Chen a rope to save his life. Could Elder Xiu be of help here? Jian Chen thought as he began to calculate things. Elder Xiu's cultivation was immeasurably deep. He could possibly be the only one that could withstand the might of the Gilligan clan. But then again, Elder Xiu had grown weary of mortal conflicts and preferred to keep to his isolated days. Jian Chen didn't wish to bring Elder Xiu into his affairs for his own personal interests as well. After all, the Gilligan clan of Cross Mountains was a huge power. He didn't wish to add to Elder Xiu's troubles by having him help accomplish an unknown task. After floating in the air with some doubt, Jian Chen bit his lip and flew in the direction of the white tiger cub. At this moment he wasn't able to tell if the tiger cub was captured or not. If the tiger cub had been taken by a weaker magical beast, there was still a chance. Like a compass, the white tiger fur led Jian Chen in the same direction for 2 hours. Finally, Jian Chen arrived at one of the mountain peaks and began to look down at the scenery. By now, Jian Chen was nearing the border to Cross Mountains. Underneath him, a group of spirit apes were gathered nearby. Standing on top of the tall trees, they gnashed their teeth as they howled at the floating Jian Chen. Jian Chen looked at the fur in his hand. From this, he could tell that the white tiger was somewhere nearby. After putting the fur away, he began to scour the ground below. He confirmed that he was already deeply entrenched within a nest of spirit apes with an innumerable amount of them standing nearby, with even more rushing to the area. Even more so, there was also the scent of several other Class 5 magical beasts. If he wasn't flying, then he would have been surrounded by the apes a long time ago. Suddenly, several golden figures could be seen flying through the air. There were 5 3-meter-tall golden spirit apes that were surrounding Jian Chen. Each one of them had a ferocious glare that boded nothing well for Jian Chen. Jian Chen began to grow serious now. He had been underestimating the spirit apes before, but he hadn't thought that there would be a Class 6 spirit ape, let alone 5 of them. Now that there were 5 Class 6 spirit apes, Jianchen didn't dare be careless anymore. With his mind, countless of tree leaves began to launch into the sky from the forest below. Then, with an azure and violet glow, they flew around Jianchen's side as a sort of protective layering. This strange display of magic stunned the 5 Class 6 spirit apes, but one of the spirit apes narrowed his eyes and roared. Then, he began to charge at Jianchen with his fists raised high in the air. Immediately, the tree leaves that were flying around Jianchen transformed to become 2 swords that were used to slash at the spirit ape. Bang! As the 2 sides struck each other, a loud bang could be heard. The swords made from tree leaves were blown apart by the spirit ape's fist, but the fist had 2 conspicuous-looking wounds. Even blood could be seen flowing down from it. Seeing how the hand of the spirit ape was bleeding, the other spirit apes were stunned. Each one looked at the human with astonished eyes, as if trying to understand how the inexplicably weak tree leaves had managed to become so sharp. Gigi, one of the spirit apes, let out an indistinguishable sound, but it was apparently in order, as the other 4 spirit apes brandished their fists and flew in to attack him. Jianchen's eyes flashed with the 2 colors as he began to control the leaves flying around him. In an instant, they formed into 10 swords and shot toward the 5 spirit apes. Another explosive bang rang through the air as the spirit apes attacked the swords. Like before, their fists gained new deep scars. But instead of stopping to wonder, the Class 6 spirit apes continued to fly at Jianchen and tried to attack him with a rippling amount of energy. Hurtling their fists through the air, they tried to block any of Jianchen's escape paths. Both of Jianchen's hands were empty now. As he floated in midair, the tree leaves began to glow brightly with the azure and violet sword chi, before flying toward the 5 spirit apes like a moth to a flame. Knowing just how strong this sword chi was now, the fists of the spirit apes began to ripple with even more power before at last there was a golden glow to their fists that made them invulnerable. Then with those fists they struck out at the tree leaves, but because of the sheer amount of tree leaves that covered the sky, almost every inch, the 5 spirits apes weren't able to defuse them all. Many of the tree leaves began to shoot into their skin, breaking through their rather strong fur. Jetting into their bodies, they left scar after scar, dyeing their entire body red with blood. In a flash, their golden skin was more crimson than gold. Zitsitizi! The 5 spirit apes began to howl in panic and pain before they utilized the earth-attributed energy they had to form outside of their bodies as a secondary form of earthen armor. The usage of the earth-attributed energy would form an incredibly strong defensive armor. Even when the azure and violet sword chi-infused leaves shot into it, all they did was leave a scar behind. They were not able to break through the armor. Taking an opportunity to retreat, he flew away from the enclosure the spirit apes had trapped him in. Then, pushing his empty hands, a dozen of the trees below exploded into wooden shrapnel. Transforming into a flood of wood, they flew into the air, and in an instant, they flew toward the spirit apes relentlessly. But with the armor, the spirit apes didn't even bother to take notice of the wood flood. Brandishing their fists, they chased Jianchen with the reluctance to give up. Continuing to fly backward, Jianchen watched as the wood flood he had created surrounded the apes. Covering the entire sky for them, the shrapnel began to shoot straight into the spirit apes mercilessly. Suffering from such an intensive attack, the armors of the spirit apes were riddled with holes and were smashed apart an instant later. Another surge of energy rippled from their body, but it was quickly battered down by Jianchen's attack, forced to break apart once again. But disregarding this, the spirit apes continued to chase down Jianchen. Jianchen's eyes flashed brightly with color as he lifted his right hand up. A single blade of pure sword chi began to form as Jianchen began to use the origin energy for the sword spirits. While his normal attacks were able to injure the Class 6 magical beasts, they were unable to land a killing blow. If he wanted to heavily injure the Class 6 magical beasts, he would need to use the sword spirits. Chapter 382. Summoning of the Ape King wielding the origin energy of the Azure and Violet Sword Spirits. Even the Class 6 Spirit Apes were able to feel Jian Chen's might. Instead of running away, they continued to inch closer toward him with equally serious expressions. With their fists flying through the air, the space around them began to distort from the energy. By now, both of Jian Chen's eyes were completely lit with two different colors. The left eye was violet and the other azure. A sight like this was especially frightening and made him seem like a demon in disguise. The origin energy was like a beam of light in Jian Chen's hand that continued to expel a sharp amount of sword qi into the sky around it. In moments, it was almost as if the entire area was fully consumed by it. Following an azure and violet swish of light, the origin energy from the sword spirits painted the entire area a splendid light as it stabbed at the spirit apes. Kacha! 5 separate cracks could be heard as the energy surrounding the 5 spirit apes' fists all shattered. Following a cleaving light from the sword spirits, a wound could be seen on each of the fists. The cut was so severe that it went straight past the bone and felt as if it had nearly cut their hand in two. Gigi! The intense pain caused each of the apes to shriek before gnashing their teeth together as they looked at their nearly bisected hands. Instead of being afraid, however, their innate berserk nature began to swell out of them, causing the fierce glint in their eyes to multiply as they glared dangerously at Jian Chen. Zitzit, one of the spirit apes began to cry out loud in the language known only to spirit apes as a way to communicate. After hearing the first spirit ape, the other 4 apes looked as if they were hesitating. However, they gnawed at their teeth and surrounded the first ape. With their swaying bodies, energy began to pour out before shooting straight to the first ape. Jian Chen continued to watch this strange sight with a confused look. The 5 spirit apes had some sort of strange technique, where 4 spirit apes could convene their energy to the one in the middle. If this went on, then the spirit ape standing in the middle would have the strength of 5 Class 6 spirit apes. With such a strong concentration of power like that, just how strong would the middle arm become? A flash of murderous intent could be seen in Jian Chen's mind. There was no way he could allow for the spirit apes to continue with this activity. In the case that whatever they were doing was finished, he would be up against an extremely terrifying opponent that would definitely prove troublesome. Just as Jian Chen was about to attack the spirit apes to prevent anything from happening, an elderly voice suddenly called out from nowhere. "Halt, just what sort of reception is this to a guest? Wise spirit, abundant spirit, golden spirit, kind spirit, clean spirit. Hurry up and receive the guest properly. Do not idle about." This elderly voice contained awe-inspiring power in his voice. At the same time, it was impossible for Jian Chen to pinpoint where this voice was coming from. Although the sudden voice had thrown off Jian Chen's plan to attack the spirit apes, Jian Chen was still looking around him seriously. It was finally after seeing nothing unusual that he began to use his omnipresence to look around the area. But when Jian Chen's omnipresence reached one of the mountain peaks, a transparent barrier blocked its path, rendering him unable to sense what was past it. Jian Chen blanched as the thought of retreating came into his mind. In order to be able to put up a barrier like this, one would need to be able to comprehend the profound mysteries of the world, meaning a saint ruler or higher. For this unknown entity to be able to put up a barrier and make his voice unable to be pinpointed, this entity would most likely have to be no weaker than a saint ruler. Although the origin energy from the sword spirits was strong enough to deal with Class 6 magical beasts or heaven saint masters, it was completely useless against a saint ruler. When the elderly voice had rang out, the 5 spirit apes had stopped their movements. However, they continued to glare at Jian Chen angrily, as if he was their most hated enemy. There was a conflicted look on Jian Chen's face. He didn't know whether or not he should stay or run. But if a saint ruler had really wanted to be his opponent, running would be useless. The only comforting thought was that there was no hostility in the elder's voice, so Jian Chen could let out a sigh of relief. Wise spirit, abundant spirit, golden spirit, kind spirit, clean spirit. Hurry up and receive the guest, do not idle about. The elderly voice could be heard once more without any more hints on where it was coming from. Gigi! The 5 spirit apes responded to the call with a respectful bow toward one of the mountain peaks. Then, with a mutual glance to each other, they beckoned Jianchen unwillingly. Jianchen didn't say a word, and instead gave a small smile before flying toward the highest mountain peak with the bloody spirit apes following from behind. Each were still biting their teeth, as if they hadn't forgotten about their animosity with Jianchen. Not too long later, Jianchen arrived at the tallest mountain peak. On this peak, there was a single barrier that seemed to cover the entire mountain peak. Suddenly, a small crack appeared within the barrier without a sound. It continued to expand before finally growing to a size large enough for a human to enter. Human, enter. I wish to speak to you. The voice spoke once more. But this time, Jianchen could hear it coming from the mountain peak. Jianchen hesitated for a moment, but he continued to fly inside. The spirit apes followed close behind, and continued to bow toward the mountain peak respectfully. Quickly spotting a gigantic cave in the mountain peak, Jianchen could see several words written in human language over the cave. Cave of the Ape King. Along with the spirit apes, Jianchen entered the cave. The cave of the Ape King was well lit, so not a single area of the cave was left untouched. The passageway through the cave was so extensive that Jianchen had walked for 100 meters through the wide areas, before finally coming to the belly of the mountain. There were plenty of curious plants that had sweet fragrances. These fragrances had a miraculous effect that made anyone feel happy, as well as removing any feelings of anger. Aside from the strange plants in the cave, there was a simple arrangement of furniture. Only a jade table and bed could be seen. From the luster of both, it wasn't hard to see that both items were very expensive. On the jade bed, a grizzly-haired elderly man sat cross-legged with plenty of wrinkles on his face, so that it was hard to distinguish his facial characteristics. By his side, there was a single white-winged tiger cub sleeping peacefully. Compared to the white tiger days ago, the white tiger cub was much larger than before, and now measured nearly a meter long. Upon seeing the white tiger cub, Jianchen had a look of utter surprise on his face. When he realized just what place he was in, a feeling of pressure could be felt once more. The 5 spirit apes quickly came to the elderly man's side and knelt down respectfully, before speaking in gibberish that Jianchen assumed to be monkey speak. The cross-legged elder looked at the 5 spirit apes with a calm eye. You are all too unruly. The human in front of us is a guest. Just how could you receive him in such a way? Hurry up and apologize. It's easy. The spirit apes immediately cried out in dissatisfaction, as if trying to justify themselves. Not all humans are our enemies. This one in front of us is a guest of the spirit apes. Hurry up and apologize. The elder stressed with a tone of finality. The 5 spirit apes hung their heads in dejected defeat, before crying out to Jianchen unwillingly. At the same time, they bowed their bodies as form of apology to him. Right now, Jianchen could only tell that the man had no hostility aimed toward himself. With a smile, he cupped his hands together. This was a misunderstanding from my own carelessness. If it were not for my recklessness, this would not have happened. Allow me to apologize as well. You 5 may go. The elder spoke to the spirit apes. The 5 spirit apes bowed toward the elder once more before shooting a quick indignant glares at Jianchen as they left the cave. As soon as the spirit apes left, the elder stood up from the bed and sat down at the table side instead. Human, come sit. I give my thanks, Ape King. Jianchen cupped his hands before sitting opposite of him. With a deep look, the elder began to size up Jianchen for a moment before sighing in admiration. It is no wonder Rum Guinness holds you in high praise. You stand out from the rest. Even with your blood-stained hands, you hold a righteous spirit. For Rum Guinness to entrust her child to you, that is a sensible choice. Jianchen's heart skipped a beat. Senior, do you know Rum Guinness? The elder smiled. You may call me Ape King. The appellations you humans use is something I am not accustomed to. The elder grew grieved after that, however. With a long sigh he spoke. Rum Guinness, her husband, and I were all elders of the Gilligan clan for over 1,000 years. We grew as close as family, and when they came across trouble, I knew it was in regards to their child. Chapter 383. 100 Grass Wine. After hearing what the Ape King said, Jianshan couldn't help but feel shocked. He hadn't thought that the Ape King would have been an elder for the Gilligan clan. But after hearing that he and Rum Guinness were good friends, he felt at ease with himself. At the very least, he knew that the Ape King wouldn't report the white tiger cub's whereabouts to the king of the Gilligan clan. For the currently pitiful white tiger cub, this was a good sign. The Ape King continued to speak. Since Rum Guinness entrusted her child to you, I can presume that she has told you about the child being a heavenly tiger god, as well as the associated dangers with it. Jianshan nodded his head without speaking a word. Human, for you to come into Cross Mountains despite the dangers, I can admire your valor. Rum Guinness did not find the wrong person to trust. The Ape King spoke with appreciation. Senior Ape King flatters this one too much. This one was luckily prepared for this situation, that's all. Jianshan tried to sound as modest as possible. The Ape King knew that Jianshan was trying to sound polite, and so he smiled. Human, you are a strong one with a strange power. I have never seen another human like you. Rum Guinness' child will not befall any danger by traveling with you. You must bear in mind to never divulge the fact that the child is a heavenly tiger god. Otherwise, it will be very problematic for you. You needn't worry about the child's wings. There are many magical beasts under the heavens. Many of them have wings. Aside from Class 7 magical beasts, other beasts will not know that this child has the special blood of a heavenly tiger god running through its veins. So hiding this fact from the human world would also be a wise choice to make. Most importantly, you must never allow a Class 7 magical beast to know about it. Senior Ape King, could the tiger cub not stay with you? With how vast the Cross Mountains are, the king of the Gilligan clan would surely not be able to find the cub here. With your strength, this would be no major task. Jianshan asked. Right now he was still in danger from the Shur and Jetta clan. Both families held a great deal of strength, and could be considered one of the top families on the continent. The tiger cub would not be safe at his side, and Jianshan only wished for the tiger cub to grow up strong without any sufferings. It had suffered enough already. The Ape King shook his head instantly before speaking with a decisive tone. Definitely not. You do not understand the situation Cross Mountains are in with the Gilligan clan. Although the territory of the spirit apes is at the border of Cross Mountains, which is some distance away from the Gilligan clan, it isn't safe for the heavenly tiger god to stay within this place for too long. Even our spirit apes clan would be burnt to the ground if news were to spread. Jianshan grew deathly serious as he began to think. Is that right? Then the only option is for me to take the tiger cub away. The child would be safest traveling the human world by your side. While the Gilligan clan is admittedly strong, even the elders would not dare step into the human territory without permission. Letting the heavenly tiger god stay in the human world would at the very least avoid persecution from the Gilligan clan. A Class 7 magical beast can transform into a human form. If the king of the Gilligan clan were to transform into a human and infiltrate our world, then wouldn't he be undetectable? Jianshan asked with worry. The Ape King laughed and replied, You needn't worry. We have an agreement with the strong ones of the human world. Unless there is approval from both sides, neither Saint Ruler can enter the other side, or they risk being punished by two separate punishments. Ah, so there was something like that? I am relieved. Jianshan's brows furrowed. This was an interesting piece of information. The Ape King continued to smile brightly. Human, you have not told me your name yet. Senior Ape King, I am called Jianshan. Jianshan cupped his hands together respectfully. Jianshan. The Ape King tested the name out, as if he was trying to commit the name to memory, before slowly extending his right hand. From a space ring, he took out 2 jade bottles and a carefully engraved wine bottle. Jianshan, this is the specialty of us spirit apes, the 100 Grass wine. Using the treasures in the Cross Mountains, I was able to ferment it for over 1,000 years, and I am loath to drink even a single sip. Since you are Rum Guinness' friend, and not an outsider, I'll permit you to sample the wine created by us spirit apes. With that, the Ape King twisted the lid off, and poured out a green liquid from within. Immediately, a sweet-smelling fragrance permeated the entire cave, so that both Jian-Chun and the Ape King could smell it. The Ape King extended a cup of the 100-grass wine toward Jian-Chun. This is a priceless treasure that cannot be bought anywhere and contains a majestic amount of qi. It isn't some minor drink with minor effects. Its best use is for helping a person think concisely. Help think concisely. Jian-Chun immediately grew happy. To be able to have such an effect like this was something he desperately wanted to help impact his strength for the better. The Ape King was seemingly pleased with Jian-Chun's thunderstruck expression. Is it not shocking? Haha. The most common 100-grass wine would usually only be able to help a person increase their saint force, meaning anyone under the Heaven Saint Master realm, for you humans would be able to use it. But the 100-grass wine in my possession is a once-in-a-thousand-year item. It is far different than what a normal 100-grass wine is like. Even if a saint ruler from the human world were to take a sip, they would feel the benefits straight away. Without hesitation, Jian-Chun gave a hasty thanks before hurriedly drinking down the wine. Jian-Chun could only feel a rising sensation make its way through his body. The very instant the wine reached his stomach, it transformed into vital energy. However, because his saint weapon had been destroyed, the vital energy was unable to be absorbed and slowly began to disappear. At the same time, an azure glow of light began to rise from Jian-Chun's dantian, before entering his forehead, and then ultimately blending with Jian-Chun's thoughts. A beautiful sensation occurred in Jian-Chun's mind as he felt his spirit become unbelievably comfortable. There was a pleasure that could be felt almost as if he had transcended on becoming an immortal, causing him to cry out in joy. Jian-Chun slowly closed his eyes and allowed his spirit to enjoy the pleasantness. While he was comfortable, his thoughts had begun to condense in a way that even the sword spirits were benefiting from, as shown from the lively thoughts being transmitted. After a while, the joyous feeling finally began to recede, causing Jian-Chun to open his eyes. At this moment, he could sense that in such a short amount of time, his thoughts had already soared to an unprecedented degree. This caused Jian-Chun to nearly jump with joy. The 100-grass wine, within the possession of the Ape King, was truly too amazing. Afterward, Jian-Chun's eyes began to glow with a fiery expression. The 100-grass wine had given him an excellent boost in strength. If only he could have another cup. Momentarily, Jian-Chun's look toward the Ape King had changed. Seeing the glint in Jian-Chun's eyes, the Ape King's eye twitched before collecting the 100-grass wine back into the bottle with a displeased look. Do not even think about my 100-grass wine. I've aged this wine for over 1,000 years in order for it to have such an effect. However much you get is however much you drink. I myself only have so much. If this was some ordinary wine, then I would gladly give you more. Upon hearing the Ape King's words, Jian-Chun couldn't help but feel embarrassed. That is, Senior Ape King, this 100-grass wine has given me a tremendous boost, see? Out of the question. The Ape King waved his hand with no hesitation. It was only for the face of rum Guinness that I served you a cup. How could you not know contentment? The Ape King treated the 100-grass wine like treasure, so there was no way he would give Jian-Chun any more. Jian-Chun hesitated for a moment before taking out a fist-sized seal from within his space ring. Senior Ape King, why don't I make an offer for your 100-grass wine? Jian-Chun was nearly drooling at the mouth for the wine, since it was a great boon to him. For the sake of his strength, he desperately wanted the item. Definitely not no trade. The Ape King replied without decay, but when he suddenly cast an eye over the item on the table, he immediately let out a stunned look. This is... Senior Ape King, I presume you recognize what this is and know of its worth. If I were to give you this for a bottle of 100-grass wine, would you be willing? Jian-Chun let out a confident smile. The item he had pulled out just now was the ruler armament seal of Treasure Mountain. Ruler armaments were extremely precious, but they were of no use to Jian-Chun. Furthermore, the seal of Treasure Mountain required the use of the blood of the Shi family in order to be used. In his hands, it was useless and could be tracked down by the Shi family. An item like this was a time bomb to Jian-Chun and could reveal Jian-Chun's position at any given time. If he were to throw it away, it would be a pity, so rather than that, He might as well trade it away for an item that would serve a better use for him. This is a ruler armament. Where did you come across such an item? The Ape King spoke with a serious look. I took it. Jianchen spoke honestly. The Ape King's eyes blinked twice as he looked at Jianchen in utter disbelief. Then, with a deep breath, he spoke gravely. Families who are in possession of ruler armaments are not easy to deal with. Jianchen, you may have invited trouble upon your head. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.